The first lie sounded like a fork dropped in the sink, small, ordinary, and somehow too loud in a quiet house. "Traffic," he said, kissing the top of my head like punctuation. It was just unholy tonight. I nodded, the way wives nod when a sentence has already decided itself. The kitchen clock answered him with that stubborn tick-tick all old clocks have, a little metronome that kept time with my heartbeat. Our dog-eared calendar hung by the pantry, clean squares waiting for grocery lists and birthday reminders. I looked at the blank boxes and wondered how many of them had already been used for something else, something I hadn't been invited to live inside. Julian draped his suit coat over a chair he never pushed in and loosened his tie like it had choked him on the highway. I smelled his cologne, citrus and cedar, and another note-writing shotgun with it. A floral, young smell, the kind that comes in a pretty bottle and a box with a ribbon you take too long to throw away. The scent was faint, but it stood up on its hind legs in my kitchen and stared me down. I slid the casserole from the oven and set it on a folded dish towel. The steam lifted and curled like a question mark. The casserole spoon clinked against the dish. He took a bite, made the right, appreciative then reached for his phone, the new one he said a client gifted him after his old screen cracked. I watched his thumb dance a rhythm across the glass. My husband of 40 years moved that thumb like a teenager, fast and sure and guilty. We didn't talk about Dallas, or about San Antonio, or about why the laundry basket had an unfamiliar lint in the corner, glittery, like it fell from a shirt meant for dancing, not spreadsheets. We talked about the price of eggs and his lower back and my dough that rose too fast last Tuesday when the AC died at the bakery. It is a strange thing to talk around your life. It feels like drying dishes. You know, you'll have to wash again. He ate. He yawned. He loved me in that polite husband way that says I'm a good man because I came home, and then he disappeared down the hallway to the shower. The water started. I stood there with the oven mitts still on and let the little universe of our kitchen hold me up. The hum of the fridge, the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the cherry red kettle on the back burner, the magnet shaped like a peach my granddaughter stuck to the freezer door. Everything in that room told the truth except the man who'd left it. When he slipped into bed, he did it like a man who doesn't want to wake what a lie put to sleep. He turned on his side, away from me. The mattress remembered where his body likes to be. I lay on my back and watched the glow from the streetlight slide across the ceiling in slow squares. When the old clock chimed 10, it sounded tired. I closed my eyes and listened to his breathing steady. There's a sound a house makes when the second person inside it is pretending. It's like a shoe left at the bottom of the stairs, a trip waiting to happen. At 5, I gave up on sleep. My feet know the kitchen in the dark. I moved through it like a woman walking inside a prayer. Faucet on, beans ground, kettle stamped to life, butter slipped into a warm pan with a sigh. When the kettle whistled, I lifted it the way you lift a child who's pretending to be asleep, gentle and sure. I poured, I stirred. I waited for resolve to appear the way coffee darkens. Gradually, then all at once. By the time the sun shouldered the blinds, I had made a decision, not the kind that throws dishes or breaks a phone on the tile, not the kind that tastes like vinegar when you say it out loud, the other kind, the paper kind. I wiped my hands on the towel and opened the drawer where we keep batteries, old keys, a tape measure, my mother's address book going brittle at the corners, and the yellow legal pads I buy by the dozen the way other people buy candles. I wrote the date at the top and underlined it. Then I wrote in my neat bakery script, observation, traffic reported by Julian at 8:57 p.m. Arrival scent cologne plus unfamiliar floral, young sweet. Behavior, new phone used during dinner, screen tilted away, note, laundry basket glitter lint. I put the pen down and let the ink dry. I don't know how to explain the relief that came from those lines. It felt like walking back to the car in a storm and finding your umbrella in the trunk where you put it last fall. My grandmother, who cataloged everything from bushel counts to baptism dates, always said paper keeps you from drowning. I believed her more in that moment than I ever had. Julian patted in, hair flattened on one side like the pillow kept a secret, and kissed the top of my head. "Morning," he said, pouring coffee like it belonged to him because it always had. He sniffed slightly and smiled at the skillet. "You spoil me." "I keep you fed," I said. "That's not the same." He chuckled. I cracked eggs and let them fall. The yolks held. The pan told the truth. That calmed me in a way I can't explain to people who don't cook. When you make food for a living, you start to see the world in ingredients. A lie is a grain of sand in the sugar, tiny, gritty, and impossible to pretend away once your teeth find it. "Big day," he said, swallowing a piece of toast without butter. "Meeting some folks about Dallas. Might run late again." He peered at me, reading my face like a billboard he hoped said, "Welcome," and not "closed for repairs." "Be careful," I said, arranging eggs on his plate like peace offerings. He left with that half-run men do when they're both late and hoping to look important. The door closed. The house exhaled. I rinsed my cup, set it in the rack, dried my hands, and picked up my keys. In the garage, the air still held last night's heat. Our 2 cars rested like old married people in side-by-side recliners. I opened his passenger door. The dome light flickered on, soft, domestic, and lit up leather seats, a handful of quarters, a straw wrapper, a faint dusting of something shimmery I'd pretend was from a party store if it weren't under the glove compartment lip. I pulled the handle. The glove box dropped its mouth open, and there it was, nudged into the far corner like a child hiding in a curtain, a tube of lubricant. Not ours, not a brand I knew. I lifted it like a baby bird, careful not to smudge or smear, the way I've seen television detectives do. It weighed nothing and everything. The cap had a tacky ring where somebody's thumb had tightened it in a hurry. A small strand had dried at the nozzle into a clear comma. I set it on the passenger seat and took a picture with my phone, the tube lined up beside a tape measure and a business card for scale. Then I slid the tube into a sandwich bag, squeezed out the air, sealed it, dated it, and wrote, "Found, passenger glove compartment, 7:32 a.m. My hands did their work without my permission. They've been feeding a town for 25 years. They know how to keep moving when the heart feels like a broken egg. Back in the kitchen, I labeled a shoebox, "Winter Scarves," and set the bagged tube at the bottom under 2 folded scarves I haven't worn since the thermostat war of 2016. I printed the last 3 months of credit card statements and circled the charges that didn't belong to us. 2 dinners in San Antonio on days he'd sworn Dallas, a boutique hotel where they give you lemon water for free and apology towels warm from a dryer you think is only for you, a flower shop called Petal and Stem where a bouquet costs more than a whole week of groceries if you let yourself be convinced. I took pictures of each circle like a woman saving a life raft for later. I returned the statements to the folder and slid it into my tote. At 9 on the dot, I called Evelyn from church. Evelyn's sister works at a family law firm with a lawyer named Harold, Audra, with a voice like a door that closes quietly and a mind like a lock that only opens for the right key. "Say you need a consult," Evelyn told me, lowered voice. "Not a divorce." "Not yet. It keeps everybody calm." "Thank you," I said, and I meant for more than the number. There are women in your life who feel like a net you didn't know you were falling toward until you do. Audra Harrell saw me the next afternoon. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet, which I trust more than I trust a place that smells like orange blossoms and lies. She wore a navy dress and sensible flats and a gold wedding band. She didn't spin with her thumb while we talked. I set my folder on the desk and slid it forward. "I'm not here to tear down the house," I said. "I'm here to stop handing my life to a fire." Audra didn't smile at that. She nodded. "Let's talk about preserving," she said, and I felt my shoulders drop an inch. It was the right word. She read the statements, clicked through my photos, made notes on a legal pad of her own. "We start with a litigation hold," she said. "We instruct the people who might have records, his bank, the phone company, any hotel or property manager, not to destroy anything potentially relevant. We don't say adultery. We don't say divorce. We say preserve. It's a simple word that saves lives. Does it make things ugly?" The word ugly came out like I was apologizing for a stain on a tablecloth. "Not any uglier than a lie already has," she said, soft, but not sorry. She asked about accounts. I told her what was joint, what was mine from the bakery. She asked if I felt safe. I told her I felt like a woman standing at the edge of a highway with a map and no sound in her ears except wind. She wrote a few more lines, then slid a paper across the desk. "This is a checklist for financial separation, not punishment, protection. If you choose to try reconciliation, you can walk back any of it later. If you don't, this keeps you from having to run down a hill you didn't choose." She also gave me a small script for my pocket. "I'm not discussing this right now. Future communications about logistics by email, please. Here is my lawyer's card." It felt thin in my hand, like a napkin. It felt like a brick in my purse. When I left her office, the sky had that clear, merciless blue some days wear when they think they've won. I sat in my car with the door open, the heat rising off the pavement, the folder heavy in my lap, and counted to 10 the way my mother taught me when grief stood in the doorway and wouldn't leave. Then I drove home and made chicken and rice with enough leftovers for tomorrow, because tomorrow was coming whether I slept or not. That night, Julian was late again. "Wretched traffic," he said, and I noticed how he watched my face when he said it, like a boy who knows his mother's hands can tell if the pie is done without opening the oven. I smiled the way women have smiled since we were made, politely, so the world doesn't burn too fast. He bent to kiss my cheek. The floral rode in on his skin again, high and sweet as a wrong note. I plated his food. I ate 2 bites of mine and pushed the peas around with my fork like an actress playing a woman with an appetite. Then I washed the dishes and turned off the kitchen light. The house fell into its familiar dark. He slept with his back to me. I watched the ceiling glow its slow squares. When the clock clicked to midnight, a little light came from the living room. The edge of his phone glowed against his thigh. I closed my eyes and pretended I didn't see the color of the world change. I didn't reach for his phone. I reached for the yellow pad in my nightstand and under the comforter wrote, 12:04 a.m., low light in living room, whispered call, laughter not mine. I put the pad away, rolled to face the window, and cracked it open an inch. The cool air pushed a small mercy into the room. The cicadas sang. Their rhythm matched the old clock. I slept at last, not because the truth had changed, but because I had found a way to make it hold still. The bakery wakes before the town does. I like it that way, how the dark gives you a little time to put your hands in dough and your thoughts in order before anybody asks you for change. At 4:30, I flipped on the front lights and the glass cases lit up empty and hopeful, like a stage before actors. Rosa came in at 5 with her hair wrapped and her laughter tucked in a thermos until the coffee had the strength to let it out. By 6, the mixer we call Mabel was thumping like a church drum, and by 7, the bell over the door started its polite little ringing that means rent will be paid and gloves will be bought for winter. This is the part people don't see when they point at a business and say, successful. The small faith of it, the way you measure flour like forgiveness, level it off with the side of your hand, and trust heat to do its work. I will say this. A morning that begins with warm bread will steady you even when the rest of your life stands crooked. Julian used to stop in around noon, back when his sales job was the kind that let him be between meetings more than he was in one. He'd sit at the end stool, crumble a biscuit into his coffee like his father taught him, and ask if I needed the ice machine fixed. He had good hands when it came to practical things. Hinges, gutters, the funny clack under a car's hood that isn't funny if you wait too long. This past year, his schedule got important, that's what he called it. "They've got me covering Dallas now," he said. Or San Antonio asked for me direct. It should have sounded like pride. Mostly, it sounded like distance. I iced cinnamon rolls while Rosa boxed a dozen for the hospital nurses. "You all right, Miss J?" she asked without looking up, the way a woman does when she's giving you a way to say no and still be cared for. "I'm all right." I lied, then fixed it. "I will be." By 10, I'd humored 3 men who think a baker can't count, kissed 2 shiny foreheads while their mamas grabbed coffee to go, and watched a husband set down his phone to look his wife in the eyes while she told him something about the dog. I don't spy on people, I just feed them. But when your house grows quiet, you start to notice the music in other kitchens. At 11, on my break, I opened the ledger in the office and pretended to care about the price of butter. Instead, I logged into the card portal and scrolled slow. The line items sat still until they didn't, pedal and stem. Twice in 2 weeks, the boutique hotel on St. Mary's, a steakhouse where the least expensive thing is a baked potato plated like it has a resume. Both San Antonio charges sat against nights he'd sworn Dallas to me with a straight face. I printed them, circled them with a red pen like a teacher I wish I'd had in 12th grade, and slid the pages into the folder I now kept under my chair, marked in small block letters, "Preserve." When lunch slowed, I texted Audra's office with one question. "Is it legal for me to request copies of receipts for any charges on our joint card?" Her paralegal wrote back, "Yes, you're an account holder. Ask for itemized receipts where available." I dialed the hotel, gave them the date and the last 4 digits, and an efficient young man with a smile in his voice emailed me a copy before my second cup of coffee cooled. 2 water bottles, 1 room, late-night minibar charge for artisan gummy bears I suspect were neither artisanal nor meant for children. I printed that too and didn't feel petty. I felt like a woman who names the birds she feeds so she'll know if they've gone missing. Rosa stuck her head in the door. "Ms. J, there's a gentleman out front asking for you." I wiped my hands and went. It was Mr. Henry from the hardware store, the kind of man who wears a cap even when the sun isn't out. He bought a single oatmeal cookie and paid with a 10. "Keep the change," he said, and then lowered his voice. "You tell that husband of yours the wiper blades he picked up were the wrong size for his make and model?" "Which car?" I asked, keeping my smile. He frowned. "Said the gray sedan." "You drive the gray sedan." "He's got that black SUV. "Maybe he meant mine," I said, steady. "Maybe," he said, the way men say, "I know a socket wrench from pliers." I boxed the cookie, thanked him, and added, "Wiper blades, wrong size," to my yellow pad with a date. Paper doesn't accuse, it remembers. On Thursday, I changed the alerts on every account I could touch. Transaction notices, daily balance emails. A text, if anything, over $100 hit the card after 10 p.m. It felt like pulling a sweater tight around my shoulders in a cold room. I also opened a new checking account in my name only, deposit only, for bakery income that didn't need to go anywhere but where it already does. I didn't close anything. I just stopped leaving my life under an open skylight. That evening, while Julian was entertaining clients, I sat at the kitchen table and sorted pictures like a woman putting together a puzzle without the box top. Here he was on our porch last Tuesday, the faint sweater fuzz of glitter on his shoulder catching the porch light. Here was the flower shop charge 2 hours earlier. Here were the toll statements, because the tag is linked to our joint card, showing his car northbound at a time that didn't make sense for a Dallas meeting that supposedly ran late. I made a timeline that started with the first traffic and ran like a string across the week. tacking down receipts and notes, drawing little arrows where two truths met in a lie. At 9:15, his text came. "Running late again, don't wait up." I stared at the screen until the blue dots went away and said out loud to the empty kitchen, "I can wait without waiting up." Then I did what steady women do. I packed tomorrow's lunches and took a hot shower long enough to wash the day off, but not so long the water got cold for nobody but me. When I climbed into bed, I put the folder on the nightstand, like you might leave a lamp on for protection. I slept. Friday, Julian came in with a box under his arm. "Gift from a client," he said, placing it on the table like a salesman placing a prize. "Newest model." I lifted the lid. A phone nestled inside like a bird in a nest. The protective film still hugged the face of it. "Your clients are generous," I said. "Big account." He smiled. Rosa once told me something her aunt taught her. If you want to know if a man is lying, watch what his mouth says and what his hands do. If they don't match, believe the hands. Julian's mouth said gift. His hands put the box right in the trash after he switched the SIM. Careful to fold the tissue paper back in first, like he'd never learned how a day is supposed to fold. Later, while he was in the shower, I took the trash out, lifted the flattened shipping box from the bin and read the label. Purchased, not gifted, delivered to his office with a credit card number I know by heart. I took a picture and put the box back exactly as it had slumped. Saturday dawned mean and humid, the kind of heat that makes even the birds cuss. I brought dough to heal, listened to Rosa tell me about a cousin who married a man with a foreign flag tattoo he couldn't explain, and at 10:30 slipped into the office to open the cell phone bill. We don't have itemized texts anymore, not like the old days when you could see each number lined up like suspects, but you can still see call durations and totals. One number kept appearing late after midnight, 9 minutes, 14. 7, 19. I copied it into my phone and saved it as a grocery store name so I could call it without my stomach hurting. The voicemail answered with a voice that tried too hard not to smile. "You've reached Bree." Nothing more. Bree, I ended the call and wrote the name down. I did not call again. That kind of knowing belongs on paper, not in your ears at work. At lunch, I drove to the bank and sat across from a manager whose tie had little anchors on it, which is either cute or prophecy. "I want to put a note on our joint accounts," I said, hands folded. 2 signatures required for transfers over 500. No new lines of credit without both present. It isn't an emergency, it's just prudent. "Prudent is my favorite word," he said, and typed in a way that felt like kindness. He printed a sheet for me to sign, then asked, "Anything else I can do?" "Yes," I said. "If a notarized document with my name on it comes through your door, will you call me before you stamp it?" He tilted his head. "That's not our usual process." "I know," I said, "but I bake your birthday cakes." Consider it a neighborly heads-up to a woman who can read a tired stamp. He smiled. "I'll put a note to call." On the way back, I stopped at the city clerk's office and froze my credit with all 3 bureaus on a computer that looked like it wanted to retire. The woman behind the counter had the exact white hair I want when I'm 70 and the exact tone a person uses when she knows grief by its first name. "Protect yourself," she said, sliding a sticky note with a list of passwords back to me. "If you reconcile, you'll be glad you had a net. If you don't, you'll be glad you had a net." That night, Julian wanted to watch a game. He sat too close to the edge of the couch cushion, phone face down on the arm, like a sleeping cat that'll bite you if you touch it. When the team he doesn't even care about scored, he clapped too loud for a man who doesn't care. I fetched him a beer and fetched myself the folder. "I need you to look at something," I said, calm like water in a pitcher. He looked at the cover. "What's this?" Receipts, I said. Schedules. I'm not asking questions tonight. I slid Audra's card across the coffee table. I'm telling you how this is going to go. Communications about logistics by email. No more midnight whispers in the living room. No more traffic that smells like a perfume counter. We're going to take a breath and make a plan on paper. He blinked like I'd shut off a light he wanted left on. Who have you been talking to? Women, I said. Myself. There's a kind of silence men use when they can't find the right performance. It's not empty, it's strategic. He picked up the card, turned it over, set it down. Are you leaving me? His voice did that little crack a man will let you hear when he wants a mercy, not a truth. I'm not leaving tonight, I said. I'm not pretending either. He stood, paced the width of the rug and back. You're overreacting. I breathed in once, out twice, the way grief taught me. I'm reacting exactly. You'll get an email from Audra on Monday. In the meantime, you can sleep in the guest room. That is not punishment. It is space, he repeated, like the word was a betrayal. Space, I said again, like the word was a boundary you can lean on if you have to. He picked up his phone and the remote, and both looked heavy in one hand. Oh, fine, he said, and left the room like he owned the hallway. I sat on the couch and didn't cry. I listened to the clock. Tick, tick, tick. It didn't blame either of us. It just kept doing what it was made to do. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You don't know me. You don't want to. But you should know your husband's been lying. Then a photo, blurry, a table with two hands, one I recognized without wanting to, curled around a glass of red wine. No faces, just fingertips and a napkin with the restaurant's name I'd already printed twice this week. I stared at the screen until the dots went away. Then I forwarded the message to my email and added it to the folder. I did not respond. A net is a net because it holds, not because it swings. Sunday morning, church sang a hymn that knows the inside of a woman's chest when she is both angry and tired. Evelyn squeezed my hand until the bridge, then patted it twice in a code that means later. After service, we stood under the live oak where the ground keeps a confetti of leaves no one sweeps. You need anything? She asked. I need time, I said, and to keep the oven on. You have both, she said. Monday, Audra filed preserves. Tuesday, a certified letter went to the hotel and the card company and a couple of places with names that sound like consulting until you read the fine print. Wednesday, the bank manager with the anchor tie called to say a man had come to notarize a document with my name on it, some kind of authorization for a transfer from bakery accounts to a marketing fund, and did I want to look before he stamped? I went down there, smiled at the young notary, and read a paragraph that tried to look like paperwork and felt like a hand in my pocket. No, I said, pleasant as a cashier on Christmas Eve, you may not notarize my signature without my person present. The man who'd brought the paper, Julian's friend from his new office, turned a shade I only see on raw salmon. I think there's been a miscommunication, he said. There has. I nodded, and it's finished. I took a picture of the document, emailed it to Audra, and went back to the bakery to pull a tray of guava turnovers from the oven. The air smelled like pink and sugar, and for the first time in a week, I let a smile sit down and stay. That night, Julian didn't bother with traffic. He came home, stood in the doorway to the kitchen, and dropped his eyes the way a boy does before the principal speaks. I don't like being treated like a criminal, he said. Then stop committing crimes against the truth, I answered and cracked 2 eggs into a bowl. The yolks held. They always do when you buy from people who let their chickens see daylight. He took the guest room again. I slept. The folder stayed on the nightstand like a lighthouse. The house kept breathing. And somewhere a number named Bree rang and didn't reach a voicemail because I didn't call it. Not yet. Paper first. Then, if there had to be a storm, at least the roof would be tarped. The clue didn't arrive with fanfare. It slid in on a Tuesday afternoon while a lemon loaf cooled, and the radio preacher said something about truth being patient. We keep a little tablet on the kitchen counter. Old, the kind that can't hold a charge unless it's plugged in. Good for recipes and nothing much else. Last Christmas, Julian logged into his Google account on it to stream a bowl game he swore he couldn't miss. He never logged out. Maybe that's providence. Maybe that's negligence. Maybe the line between the two is thinner than a pie crust in summer. I wasn't snooping. I was looking up a recipe for a citrus glaze Rosa swears will make hard men soften, and then, without thinking, I tapped the little map icon I always use to check traffic for deliveries. The screen bloomed blue and white, and a tiny circle in the corner said, "Your timeline like a friend who knows more than she should." I tapped again, the way you sometimes touch a bruise to make sure it still hurts. A calendar appeared. Each day a dot. Some dots were gray, some were red. I picked yesterday. The map drew a blue ribbon from our house to the bakery to a toll road, and then to a part of town I only visit when somebody's niece graduates. It paused at a rectangle labeled Madison Quarters and stamped the kind of sentence you never want a machine to say about your life. Stayed 7 hours 12 minutes, arrived 11:08 p.m. Departed 6:20 a.m. I didn't breathe. The tablet didn't care. It offered me an arrow to see more. I tapped. Locations at this stop. Building A, garage level 2. Nearby places, the Willard Lounge, Bree's Tacos. Bree! I whispered before I meant to. The tablet showed other days. The same dot, the same address. Wednesdays, Thursdays. Not every week, but often enough to be a pattern and not a coincidence. It even offered little photos it presumed were helpful. Street view of the brick entrance, a glossy banner with move-in specials, a smiling model whose only honesty was in her hair, which had refused to be tamed fully by a stylist who has seen worse. The lemon loaf cooled. The clock ticked. My hands, my good, flower-soft hands, went steadier than my heart. I hit more options, export this day, and saved a PDF to the tablet with a name it suggested that felt like an indictment. Timeline_2005-10-07.pdf. Then I backed out, tapped the month view, and exported those too. October, September, August. Each time the progress bar slid across, I felt something inside me settle like a layer cake that won't fall now that you've left the oven door alone. I emailed the files to myself and to the address Audra's paralegal had set up for me, preserve at ... and watched them leave the outbox like letters I'd seal with wax if this were another century. Next, I opened the toll account. Not because I'm nosy, because I pay the bill, and matched nights to booths. Northbound, 10:42 p.m., southbound, 6:31 a.m. That's not Dallas traffic. That's a man who knows a gate code. I thought about calling Evelyn. I thought about driving. I did neither. Instead, I laid a fresh sheet of paper on the kitchen table, wrote the address in the neatest handwriting I own, and beneath it, 3 short sentences I've learned to trust. Assume nothing. Confirm quietly. Put it on paper. At 2, I pulled on the cardigan that makes me look like somebody's auntie, even if I'm nobody's today, tucked the tablet into a tote, and told Rosa I was going to check the ice supplier, which, for the sake of my own soul, I suppose I was. The kind of ice that lives in a person's chest and won't melt until you stand it in a warm, true place. I drove like a person with somewhere to be and nobody to prove it to. Madison Quarters sits where a warehouse used to breathe. Now it's glass and brick and a leasing office that smells like a candle named after a place nobody you love lives. I parked across the street under a sycamore and didn't turn off the engine. 5 minutes. 10, 20. I told myself I'd leave at 30. At 22, a black SUV I could draw from memory turned under the arch, taillights throwing a soft red on the polished concrete. I didn't need binoculars. I needed eyes and a heart that had been told the truth by a tablet. He glided into garage level 2 like a man who has never worried about losing his place. I lifted my phone slow, framed the entrance sign and the gate arm, took a photo that included the date and time in the corner because I finally figured out how to turn that on. Then I took my hands off the phone and placed them, palms down, on my knees. Don't be a fool, I told myself out loud. Don't be a hero. Be a paper trail. I drove to the office supply store and bought one of those little portable time stampers the flower shop uses on order slips. The young man at the register asked what I needed it for, and I said, "I'm learning to name my days," which startled him into silence. Back home, I slid the new photos into the folder. I stamped the corner, October 7th, 3:12 p.m., like a notary of my own grief. That evening, when Rosa closed, I sat at the office computer in the bakery and typed the address into the county property records. I have learned that the first lie people tell is with their mouths. The second is with what they name things on paper. The complex is owned by a shell with a nice-sounding name. Leases aren't public, but utility accounts are sometimes if you know where to look. I didn't pretend to be a detective. I made a list of what a lawyer could ask for and wrote it like a grocery list for a woman who intends to feed herself well. Lease in name of Terrence Julian. I gave him his full government name because sometimes you have to put a man's middle initial on the table to remind yourself he is a person and not a storm. Utility start date, fob activation logs, garage access card number, security camera entry shots. I emailed the list to Audra with the timeline PDFs and said, "When you're ready." Her reply came back like a hand on the small of my back, steadying without directing. "I'll send preservation letters first thing. Do not confront. If he escalates, step away. It will make the records talk." I made dinner, rice and roasted carrots the color of autumn and mercy, and left a plate in the microwave with a sticky note, "Warm 2 minutes on high." I did not wait up. Around 11, the garage door lifted under my bedroom like a yawn. At 11:14, a text popped up on my phone from a number saved under a grocery store nobody stocks. "Home. You awake?" I put the phone face down on the nightstand and let the clock answer him. Tick, tick, tick. Wednesday morning, Audra's assistant called. "We've issued litigation hold notices to the apartment management and the building's third-party security contractor," she said. "Also to your bank for joint funds and the toll authority for tag activity. We included a non-spoliation warning for any electronic records connected to garage level 2 and building," as she paused. "You doing okay?" "I have bread in the oven," I said. It wasn't a metaphor. It was the thing keeping me from unraveling. By lunch, the bank manager with the anchor tie had left me a voicemail. "I received your attorney's letter. We've placed an internal note on joint accounts. No cashier's checks or wire transfers without dual authorization. Also, I'm sorry you're going through this. If you need me to personally verify any in-branch activity, I will. I saved it to the folder, bank_voicemail_2025-10-08.wave, because sometimes the kindest things become the clearest things when someone later forgets what they said. At 2, a young man from Madison Quarters called Audra, and then called me at her direction. His voice had the careful tone of someone who has been told to use only nouns. "We've received a request to preserve records," he said. "We will comply." He did not say my husband's name. He did say, "The account ending in -42 is active through March." "Thank you," I said, and wrote -42 on the yellow pad. Then I looked at my own checking account number and breathed out slow. Mine ends in -07. I should not have felt smaller than a number. I did anyway. That night, I made tea and opened Google Maps again, not because I needed more pain, because I wanted to be sure I wasn't inventing an enemy because I was lonely. The month view showed a modest man's honesty. Most nights at our home, too many nights under another roof. I tapped the address and, for my own foolish curiosity, hit directions as if I didn't already know the route. The blue line drew across my town, past the park where we once slow danced to a band we pretended was famous, past the hospital where I held Daniel so recently it still lives on my hands, past all the places we made a life, to a building that thinks glass can make you clean. My tea cooled. Somewhere in the guest room, a man scrolled on a screen and thought silence meant safety. I closed the tablet and laid my palms on its back until the heat seeped through to me. Thursday. The first envelope came back. Certified mail. Green card signed by an office manager who will someday have to testify that she received what she received. Audra loves green cards. Jurors understand the mail, she once told me. They don't always understand the cloud. I paper-clipped it to the demand letters and left them on the dining table beside a vase of zinnias I cut from the pots out back. Color matters when your life goes gray. So does arranging something in the center of a table you otherwise only wipe down. Around 5, Evelyn called. I made a pot roast big enough for your whole day, she said. Come eat. I have a few more orders to box, I said. Then bring your pretty self and your tired eyes, she said. I'll box you. We sat on her couch and watched a show where strangers buy houses they can't afford in towns they don't know. Halfway through, she paused it and turned to me. You holding? I have paper, I said. She nodded like that was the same thing, which right now it was. You going to go to that apartment? No, I said. I went once. That's enough of me for that address. Good. She said, don't crowd a fire. Call someone with water Friday. Audra filed a request with the court for a temporary order about the joint funds. Nothing dramatic, nothing that says war where boundary will do. She also sent a one-page letter to the apartment manager that said, in the kind of plain language I love, do not terminate or alter the lease or access privileges until my client's rights are accounted for. Do not allow unauthorized subtenants. Do not destroy footage. Late that night, long after Rosa's laugh went home and my dishwater cooled, a second text came from the grocery store that wasn't, you don't know me, but you should know he isn't careful. Apartment 3B, I did not ask who they were. I typed 3B on the yellow pad, circled it once, and slid the pad under the folder just in case I got the urge to act like someone the news would talk about. Then I locked the front door, checked the back, turned off each lamp in the room in a small ritual that calms a woman who has had enough light and not enough sight, and went to bed. Saturday morning, my phone pinged with a notice from the toll authority. New vehicle tag added to account. I had turned those alerts on myself the night I found the timeline, thinking nothing much would come of it. The new tag number was off by a single digit from our SUV, a rental. I wrote it down. When you can't trust a person's mouth, you trust the math of their life. By noon, Audra had already sent an addendum to the preservation letters. Include garage camera footage and tag reader logs for new vehicle tag ending 6JX. She CC'd me because she knows I like to see what my steadiness is buying. That evening, when Julian came through the kitchen on his way to the guest room, he paused, hand on the doorframe like a man thinking of saying a thing and then deciding to spare himself. You cut your hair, he said. I trimmed it, I said. It looks nice, he said, and for half a second we were 23, and he'd found me by the punch bowl at a friend's wedding and asked if he could touch the curls that had escaped my barrette. For half a second, I remembered the way a young man can be true even when the older man he becomes forgets. Then the moment passed. He went down the hall. I wrote hair. Trimmed in my journal not because it mattered to a court, because it mattered to me that I still change for myself. I fell asleep with my palms open on the quilt. I dreamed of map pins dropping onto a clean sheet of paper and making a constellation that spelled a word I didn't want to read. When I woke, the word was still there, address, which is not just where you go, it's also what you decide to speak to. And in the morning light that knows every corner of my kitchen, I knew the speaking was coming. Not the kind with a pot thrown across a room, the kind with a letter printed on good paper and a woman who spells her own name slowly so the clerk gets it right. I poured coffee, watched steam curl itself into vanishing, and said to the quiet house the one sentence that reaches for courage without trying to scare it away. Paper first, Lila. Then whatever has to come by Monday. Paper had begun to answer where a man would not. Audra texted at 8:13 a.m., courier inbound, don't open until we're on the phone together. I propped my cell between my shoulder and cheek, dusted a tray of cinnamon knots, and listened to the bell on the bakery door ring folks in and out of a life that, thank God, still made sense. At 9:02, a young woman in a navy blazer set a thick, clasped envelope on my counter. Like a newborn, you pass only to hands that will hold steady. Ready? Audra said. As I'll be, I said. Top tab is the bank, she said. Open slow. I slid out a sheaf and laid it flat the way my mother taught me to lay anything that matters. Line items tell stories when you stop interrupting them. There it was in tidy type. A CH debit, Madison Quarters Residential, $2,195, recur. The description field said what men won't. Lease 3B. Next page. A cashier's check drawn from our joint account. Amount $2,195 again, issued the day after I paid the mortgage. Another sheet, utilities, M Quarters electric submeter, start June 1st. A pattern is confession. You see it, Audra said. I do, I said, and put a sticky note on the top page like a small yellow flag planted on a hill that's finally been named. Next tab, she said. Toll and tag readers. Those pages were cooler, more machine. Night after night, the tag ending 6JX breezed under the garage arm at 11:07, 11:23, 12:14, left again before dawn. No poetry, just numbers that lined up with the blue dots I'd already saved. Third tab, she said quietly. From the property manager. Basic lease summary, FOB assignment log, and the tenant intake sheet. I pulled them out like someone taking a hand out of cold water and trying not to gasp. Resident, Terrence A. Miles. Unit 3B access devices. FOB number 1142, issued May 28th. Garage permit, space B-27, emergency contact, left blank, additional occupants, left blank. Any co-signer? I asked, though I knew the answer. No, she said. He did that part alone. Something in me felt both insulted and relieved. He hadn't mortgaged my name for his secrecy. But he had spent our money like we share everything but truth. Last tab, Audra said, and I could hear the paper in her voice before I saw it. Security stills at the garage gate. Manager turned over 2 pulls before counsel shut it down, pending formal subpoena. They're grainy, and faces are faces. But there's the SUV. There's FOB number 1142 lighting the pedestal. There's the timestamp. She was right. You could have told me it was any man and any woman, and I might have had mercy. But mercy is for uncertain things. The curve of his shoulder, the way he tucks his chin when he's cold, the brim of a ball cap he always bends the wrong way. Those don't belong to strangers. The woman beside him wore a hood up and hair tucked, body language like somebody who knows where the cameras live. I didn't chase the silhouette. I wouldn't gift the silhouette that power. I'm not printing those, I said. You don't have to, she said, and her whole profession softened for a sentence. We have enough. We already had enough. I put each stack back in its tab, pressed the prongs down, and closed the clasp, but like you close a door on a room you're not ready to enter again. What now? I asked. 2 tracks, Audra said. Track 1? Money. I'll file a simple motion today. Status quo order on marital funds, and an order to show cause why joint funds were used to establish a separate residence. We'll ask that the lease be terminated without penalty, with all charges reimbursed from his individual earnings. Track 2. Care. You decide your house terms. Guest room stays, guest room, counseling, no contact with anyone involved. Put it in writing. I'll help you draft paper over posture, I said, because sometimes you have to hear your own lesson back. Exactly, she said. One more thing. If he panics, men often do when paper walks in. Don't argue. Say, my lawyer will communicate with you and yours. Then end the conversation. I hung up and stood there with my hands on the manila like you do after a prayer, palms warm from having touched something larger than yourself. Rosa slid a box of warmth onto the counter. Apple turnovers, still breathing cinnamon. You okay? She asked, without looking too hard at my face. I will be, I said. I need 20 minutes. I took the binder to the office, printed 1 page with the address line alone, no lease, no stills, and placed it on top. Then I took a clean sheet and wrote the only invitation I had the energy to offer. Terrence Kitchen Table, 7 p.m. We will talk from paper, no yelling, no gaslighting. We will end at 7:45 whether we are done or not. L. At 6:58 he walked in from the garage carrying the day like a man who couldn't remember where he left it. He saw the table before he saw my face. The binder, the single page with the address line, the legal pad with 3 short sentences he could read across the room. He stopped, hands still in his jacket pockets, like a boy called into the principal's office. You set the table? He said, trying for light. I did, I said. Sit. He sat like a man who believes chairs might bite. I slid the top sheet toward him, just the address. He didn't touch it. He stared the way people stare at an ocean they thought they'd never see up close. You paid for apartment 3B with joint funds, I began, calm, like you speak to a child with a candle near a curtain. You opened utilities in June. Your fob is 1,142. Your garage space is B27. You spend nights there. I know because the bank, the tag readers, and your own phone told me. I'm not here to debate any of that. He swallowed. Leela. No, I said, and laid my palm on the binder without opening it. We are not telling stories. We are setting terms. His mouth worked like words were heavy. It's not what you— Terrence, I said, and gave him the full shape of his name so he'd know I was home. If you need to tell yourself a version, write it down and mail it to your lawyer. My terms are these. Guest room remains guest room until I say otherwise, not because you're lonely. Counseling. Individual for you immediately. Joint after 8 weeks if I choose. Full termination of the lease at Madison Quarters within 30 days. You will not renew, sublet, or transfer the lease to anyone known to me. Reimbursement to our joint account for every dollar spent on that address since June. No contact of any kind with the person you stayed there with. If she reaches out, you forward it to your attorney and mine. No deleting accounts, devices, or histories. I have preservation notices served. Spoliation will hurt you more than honesty ever could. All communication about this goes through counsel unless I invite otherwise. We do not perform this for friends or family. We tell the truth we can carry. We're in counseling. We are pausing decisions. We are not retaliating. I slid the paper across. He didn't pick it up. He stared at a knot in the wood table we've eaten 1,000 meals at and said the smallest sentence a man can say when the shape of his power changes. I'm sorry. I let the words land and kept my body still so I wouldn't mop up what wasn't mine to clean. You may be, I said. It doesn't change the paper. He reached for the top tab, the bank pages, as if seeing numbers might make them loyal again. His hands trembled. He flipped to the fob log, to the toll line items, to his own name on a lease he must have signed with a pen that did not warn him it would someday speak. He didn't ask how I got them. He knew. Everybody understands the mail. I never meant to, he began. Terrence, I said, softer now because the point had been made. You meant every separate step. Meaning isn't a single moment. It's a pattern. This is your pattern. My pattern is the remedy. He nodded, slow, like a man learning to agree with gravity. What if I end it? He asked, voice low. Now, today, you end it because it's wrong, I said, not because I found it. He folded forward, elbows on knees, pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes like he could rub his past into different pictures. I don't know what to say. That's fine, I said. Tonight isn't for talking. It's for reading. I slid across one more page, Audra's draft of a status quo stipulation with blanks for his signature. If you sign this, my lawyer will hold it until your counsel reviews. If you won't, we'll ask the court to enter it anyway. He looked up, something like anger flickering and collapsing on his face before it became something more familiar. Shame. You went to a lawyer before you came to me? I went to a lawyer so I could come to you like this, I said and gestured at the quiet room, at the absence of dishes thrown, at the way the zinnias still stood upright in their vase. He sat back. The clock on the stove ticked into 7:41. I stood, not because I was done being hurt, because I was done with this portion of the evening. We end at 7:45, I said. I am putting the binder away now. I will not chase you around this table. You may sleep in the guest room. If you need a number for a counselor, there are 3 on the counter. Pick one before noon tomorrow. He didn't move. I closed the clasp on the binder and carried it to the credenza, the way you carry a dish that will burn you if you forget what it is. When I came back, he had picked up the single sheet with the terms and was reading each line like a man reading weather he can't talk out of raining. At 7:44, he whispered, Okay, what? I asked. Okay to your terms, he said, and the smallest exhale left his chest like he'd been holding a breath for months. Good, I said. Put it in writing. I pointed to the pen by his elbow, the cheap one from the courier's pad. He signed his name under received and agreed. The A in his middle initial larger than his first, the way it always is when he is scared and trying not to be. I took the paper, slid it into a clear sleeve, and put it back in the binder. You can go, I said. The guest room has clean sheets. He stood, eyes shining in the way men hate other people to see, and walked down the hall without his usual touch on the wall, by the light switch. When the door closed soft, I sat back down at the table with the zinnias and wrote the date in my journal. Then I wrote one more sentence for myself and for any woman who ever needs it. Don't mistake a signature for a change. Watch the days. I washed the 2 coffee cups we hadn't touched and turned off the lamp. The house breathed. So did I. The guest room door stayed closed through breakfast, which was mercy for both of us. I whisked eggs, the fork ringing against the bowl like a little bell that calls you back to yourself. I poured him a cup anyway and left it by the hallway in case a man who'd been living lies remembered what warmth tastes like. At 9:07, my phone chimed. Audra, filed. Clerk stamped the status quo order request. Judge put us on for Friday a.m. I served preservation letters on the building, the bank, and your phone carrier. Do not discuss content with him. Let paper speak. I sent back a heart, not for joy, but for steadiness. Then I did a smaller thing that felt bigger than it looked. I moved my grandmother's blue mixing bowl, always kept dead center on the kitchen shelf, 2 inches to the left. That is how you tell your own soul a room has changed. You move something you love and let it be different. Terrence came out around 10, dressed but not arranged, eyes puffy, breath clean. He'd showered like a man who wanted to rinse a story off his skin. He looked at the coffee he hadn't poured and then at me. "I called a counselor," he said, voice low. "He has a 4:30. "Good," I said, and buttered my toast with precise care. "Send me the name." He did. Dr. Halverson, individual. It landed on my screen like a receipt. I nodded at the guest room door. "Fresh towels are in the basket. I'll take the 11 o'clock at work," he added. "HR pinged me for a check-in. Routine?" he said, then winced at his own reflex. Routine is the cheapest word a liar buys. "Take whatever meetings you like," I said. "The stipulation draft is on the counter for your counsel." He picked it up. He didn't say thank you. He just read, which was better. After he left, the house exhaled. I gathered my own errands into a binder of Sunlight, walked to the bank, check on the proof prints at the copy shop, drop a dozen still warm poppy seed muffins to Rose's mother 2 doors down because grief shouldn't make you forget how to be a neighbor. At the bank, I sat across from a woman in a navy blazer with nails the color of pomegranate seeds. "I need to freeze joint autopays except mortgage and utilities," I said, "and I'd like to open an individual account in my name only." Her eyes softened. Banks see whole lives in ledgers. "We'll flag anything with Madison Quarters in the descriptor," she said, fingers already singing on the keys. "We can also send you alerts when purchases over a set amount hit the joint account." "Do that," I said. "Make the threshold 50. She printed forms, the old-fashioned kind with carbon copies that stain your fingers faintly blue. I signed my name again and again until the loops steadied. When I stepped back into the street, September felt like it had forgiven August. The air was kinder. The light was the kind that puts brass halos on ordinary things. I walked to the copy shop and collected 2 crisp packets labeled Timeline, June to Present, and Bank Lease Abstract. The owner, a man who's watched my hair gray over the years, glanced at the label and then at me. He slid a handful of plastic sleeves across for free. "Pages that matter shouldn't get wrinkled," he said. Back at the bakery, a little girl pressed her face to the glass and fogged up the case with desire for a pink sugar cookie. Her mother laughed and wiped the fog with the side of her hand. I boxed 2 and said, "For later, on me," because sometimes you put sweetness in the world where you can. At 1:21, Audra's name flashed again. "Heads up! Building acknowledge receipt of notice. Their counsel says they'll cooperate with termination and return prorated prepaid funds once we show marital account statements. Also, your husband's counsel called. He'll sign the stip and will advise no contact. Expect something performative from the other party. Ignore it and forward to me." Your performative arrived at 2:06 as a single, punctuation-starved text from an unknown number. "We owe you nothing. He loves me. We were before." I forwarded it to Audra without a breath and added, "This number blocked." Then I stood in the back room and put both hands flat on the stainless table the way you brace a cake before you cut it. A woman tries to make your wound about her. You don't give her your stage. At 3:02, HR ceased to be routine. Terrence's name lit up my phone, then cut off. A minute later, a new text. Meeting ran long. They asked about outside housing after seeing my expense report. I told them I'm working through personal things and referred them to counsel, coming by to grab the insurance card before counseling. I stared at the words expense report until the letters separated and I could read them without heat. If company money found the apartment too, the world would accelerate on its own. That wasn't my show to direct. My job was home and heart and the thin seam between them where boundaries get stitched. He came at 3:28. brown envelope in hand. He stood in the doorway like a man asking a house for permission. "Insurance cards in the desk?" he asked. "Top drawer, under the stamps," I said. "And your notebook, too." He fetched and turned to go, then turned back. "I sent the no-contact email," he said, "from my personal account. Do not contact me by any means. Any future communication will be forwarded to counsel." Attached a PDF of the stipulation notice. "Forward it to Audra," I said. "I did," he said, which I hadn't expected him to think to do. He hesitated, like a man wanting credit for starting kindergarten. I didn't reward him with softness I could use on myself later. "Counseling at 4:30, I reminded. He nodded and left. I stood at the sink and washed 3 cups that didn't need washing until their rims squeaked. It's silly, there's a dishwasher. But some days soap is prayer. Circles with a cloth are a kind of chant. At 5:11, my sister Renee called. "I'm at the farmer's market with a bag of substitute dinner," she said. "Tell me you're home." "I am," I said. She arrived with figs, soft goat cheese, a hunk of bread, and the kind of hug that happens sideways and lasts exactly as long as you need. We ate at the counter like teenagers, tearing bread with hands because knives felt like too much metaphor. "You going to tell church?" she asked at last. "Some of it," I said. "The blessed portions." "The terms, not the names. My business doesn't need to be a potluck." She nodded, pleased. "You always did know how to plate truth without making it a spectacle." We washed the cutting board, and she tucked 2 figs in my fridge like promise. "Call me if your evening gets long," she said at the door. "It won't," I said. "I'm keeping my nights short." At 7:03, my phone chimed again. Dr. Halverson. "Ms. Miles, just a courtesy note, shared with client permission. Mr. Miles has scheduled twice weekly individual sessions for the next 6 weeks, then weekly thereafter. He has agreed to begin an empathy and accountability framework we use for betrayal trauma cases. You are welcome to contact my office for scheduling a separate session to discuss the conjoint approach. We will not share anything from his sessions without a mutual release." The clinical neatness of it steadied me the way squared corners on a bed do. I sent back, "Thank you for the note. I will consider a conjoint after 8 weeks only. No releases signed at this time." At 8:12, Terrence texted from the driveway. "Can I come in? I brought what the counselor asked me to give you, a written account. I know you don't want words, but he said to hand it to you, not read it or defend it." I opened the door without inviting his eyes to my face. He held out a sealed envelope with my name on the front in his neat engineer handwriting, the same hand that had labeled Christmas boxes for years. Lights, stockings, nativity. I took it and walked it straight to the credenza and put it under a paperweight, a smooth river stone we brought home from a vacation back when we didn't need to label anything. "I won't read anything until after the court date Friday," I said. "Then only if I want." "Okay," he said, and looked like a man relieved to have completed a homework assignment. "You return the keys?" I asked. He reached into his pocket and laid 2 fobs on the counter. "Gate and garage," he said. "I emailed the manager for the termination and CC'd Audra. 30 days. No penalty with the stipulation. I'll stay at a hotel if you want me out of the house. Dr. Halverson said, follow your wife's verbs." "I have verbs," I said. "Stay in the guest room. No wine in this house for 90 days. No disappearing errands after 9. Share your location with me like a teenager until further notice." He took out his phone and pressed settings with the humility of a 16-year-old. The ping landed on my screen a second later. "Terrence, location sharing enabled, indefinitely." He looked at the floor, then at his hands. "What else can I do that isn't theater?" "Laundry," I said. "Dishes. The list on the fridge. And tell your mother the version of this you can carry without making her hold what's mine." He nodded, grateful for something that wasn't feeling. "And work?" he asked softly. "Don't drag me into your performance review," I said. "If HR asks, tell the truth. You used joint funds improperly. You've corrected. You're in counseling. Your personal life will not be wandering into the company credit card again." He flinched but nodded. "I'll sleep," he said, half-question. "In the guest room," I said again. "Door closed?" When the house went quiet, I sat on the back steps and watered the planters. The basil leaned into the night. The rosemary pretended not to need anyone. The cosmos relit their little lanterns like they do when the sun has done its part. The neighbors' wind chimes answered a breeze I couldn't see. I folded my hands and prayed the small prayer I pray when I am too tired for big ones. Keep me kind and clear. The next morning, the world did what it does. Email, bread orders, a smile for the child who brought me a crayon drawing of a bakery. But public life does not mean secrets stay inside. At 10:19, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Miles? This is Carla. I handle accounts for Madison Quarters. I wanted to confirm in writing we've received your counsel's letter and Mr. Miles's termination request. We'll cease billing after October 31st and will arrange key return. We also wanted to acknowledge receipt of the legal hold. Our systems team has preserved logs and any video at ingress points, per your notice." "Thank you," I said, and wrote down every syllable like it was spice to go back to later. At 1:02, a message slid in from a colleague of Terrence's, someone I only knew by the way their name floated up in his stories. No details from me. "Lila, not my place, just, I'm glad you're insisting on counseling." He needed a wall to press against. I hope he uses it to climb. I stared at the words press against and climb until they didn't take. Then I washed my hands and kneaded a batch of dough with quiet strength until the gluten formed a window pane you could read light through. At dinner, I set one plate on the table and left his on the counter. He ate in the guest room and rinsed his dish. He left the kitchen towel folded square the way I like it, corners aligned like a truce flag. At 9 o'clock, a ping Terrence arrived home. He hadn't gone anywhere. Still, the phone wanted me to know. I smiled despite myself. Even machines understand how to witness. I did not open the envelope with his account. I watched a 30-minute documentary about bird migration and cried for geese I'd never meet. It wasn't about the geese. It never is. When I turned down the bed, I moved my grandmother's bowl another inch, and then I slept, lightly, but in my bed. I had stayed put in my life. That counts for something even the court can't measure. By Friday morning, I could fold sleep like a dish towel, thin and square but serviceable. I wore the navy dress that behaves in a courthouse, the one with sleeves long enough to look like respect. I put 2 mints and 1 smooth river stone in my pocket. The stone was for my hand to hold when words turned sharp. Audra met me on the marble steps with a legal pad already scarred by her pen. "We're in and out," she said, voice even. "Status quo order, preservation, no contact, lease termination acknowledgement." "You say, 'Good morning, Your Honor,' and otherwise let me do my job." I nodded and breathed through my collarbone the way the counselor on that one podcast taught. Slow in, slower out like you're cooling soup. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. Our judge wore the expression of a woman who has already seen everyone's first act. Terrence sat across the aisle with his lawyer. He didn't look over, which was courteous or cowardly depending on your tilt. I kept my eyes on the seal on the wall and the brass clock above it, ticking like a metronome for the civilized. Audra stood when our case was called. "We have a stipulated entry preserving marital assets, prohibiting dissipation, and imposing a no-contact provision as to the third party," she said, clean as a chalk line. "We also ask for an order compelling the apartment complex to terminate the lease without penalty." and return any joint funds, and for preservation, notices to the bank and cellular carrier opposing counsel Rose, gray suit, careful hair. No objection, Your Honor. My client will comply. The judge looked at him over the top of her reading glasses, then at me. Mrs. Miles, anything to add? I stood, palms damp, thumb rolling the river stone. No, Your Honor. Paper says it. The judge's mouth twitched. Approval, maybe, or a compliment to brevity. Orders entered. Counsel will exchange draft language by close of business. Mr. Miles, you are to abide by the no-contact provision. If the court learns otherwise, we'll have a different kind of Friday, understood? Yes, Your Honor, Terrence said. 5 minutes later, we were back in the corridor where life is an echo. Audra squeezed my elbow. You did perfect. She tilted her head. Want a coffee, or do you want quiet? Quiet, I said, and a bagel I didn't bake. We sat on a bench with sesame seeds in our laps. Audra sketched next moves. 2 lanes now. Legal lane, disclosures, settlement posture, make sure payroll adjustments reflect whatever HR decides about the expense report. Healing lane, your counselor consult, daily boundaries, repair actions. Don't let those lanes merge until they earn it. I won't, I said. The bagel was ordinary and tasted like mercy. By noon, the written orders hit my inbox with the court stamp, angled like a firm hand on a shoulder. I forwarded them to the bank, the building, and, after a brief sit with my pride, to Terrence. His reply was a single word. Received. Good. Not sorry, not please, not a bouquet of adjectives trying to pass themselves off as repentance. Just received. A start is an honest word that doesn't wobble. At 1:30, my phone buzzed with a different hum, the one I reserved for my church friend group. Ladies, bring your recipes tonight. Potluck at Tanya's. Theme is comfort that holds. I typed back, I'll bring the macaroni with the crunchy top and keep my mouth soft. Tanya hearted it. Renee texted a row of clapping hands and 3 little hearts in a crooked line. The bakery ran like a good old song. Elena's laugh, the dough's elastic sigh under my palms, the bell that announces a child shorter than the case. I boxed a dozen cinnamon rolls for the potluck and wrote warm them low on the lid like an instruction to time. At 3:12, Terrence texted from his work address. HR concluded inquiry. Travel card misuse requires reimbursement plus mandatory ethics training. I'm off the Dallas project for now. I told them I'm in counseling and provided counsel's info. They asked if anything from this will touch the company. I said no, wanted you to know. I let the message sit until my heart quit flinching at the word misuse. Then I typed, received, reimburse promptly, share proof of completion, and reimbursement with counsel. Do not narrate this to me, just do the verbs. Understood, he wrote. Then, after a pause long enough to be deliberate, thank you for not letting me turn this into theater. I didn't reward that either. Some days silence is how you clap. By late afternoon, the envelope on the credenza began to feel like a guest, and I set a little saucer of patience beside it. 8 weeks, I'd told the counselor's note. 8 weeks is 2 calendars. A permission slip to keep my peace. I tucked the envelope deeper under the paperweight and went to the sink to wash the macaroni dish, because you take your casseroles to potlucks the way you want your life to look, clean and carried with 2 hands. Tanya's living room smelled like nutmeg and something baked with love and not enough butter. A dozen women filled the chairs and floor bowls and pans, making a soft clatter song. They are not the kind of friends who ask for details like souvenirs. They ask how to show up. House verbs, I told them, and they laughed into their plates. Then we wrote them on Tanya's whiteboard because faith is practical when it's good. Knock, ask, inform, consent, preserve, repair, rest. I added one more, witness, and underlined it twice. Witness what? Someone asked. Small good things, I said. The towel folded square. The location ping. The laundry done without the parade. Not as credit. For heaven's sake, not that. but as evidence of a muscle trying to learn. Tanya passed me the honey for my tea and squeezed my fingers once. In our language, that means we're not done being women in a world that mistakes our tenderness for a doormat, so we write our names on the mat. When I got home, the house was tidy in a way that felt earnest. The guest room door was closed. A load hummed in the washer, and the laundry room smelled like lavender from a bottle with a name trying to be a poem. On the kitchen counter, a half sheet of paper in Terrence's handwriting. Friday chores, done. Saturday garage, Sunday gutters. He had drawn little boxes next to each, like a boy who never met a sticker chart he didn't want to win. I smiled despite myself and wrote porch light at the bottom, then drew an empty box with a tiny star beside it. A man is still a person. Encouragement doesn't mean absolution. At 9:16, he texted from the guest room. "Do you want me to set coffee for 6:15, I wrote. "And 1 scoop less than you think." "Copy," he replied, like a pilot to a tower. Saturday came with a varnished sky. We worked parallel and quiet. He pulled every box from the garage and labeled with block letters. I pulled recipes from drawers and labeled with my mother's cursive, fudge, gumbo, grits for a crowd. Labels are just names that stand up straight. In the afternoon, I drove to Dr. Halverson's office for my consult. The waiting room was beige on purpose. He met me at the door and shook my hand like a colleague, not a case. "I won't speak to his sessions," he said once we sat. "Your lane is yours, and we honor that. If you choose, I can outline a conjoint roadmap, not now, not next week, but when and if you decide the floor under you is solid." "Outline," I said, "not promises." "Disclosure timeline with dates you control," he said, ticking on his fingers. "Boundary agreement in plain language, weekly check-in scripts that put facts before feelings so feelings have a safe place to follow, and amends practice that is behavioral, not lyrical. We avoid the hero arc. We build the carpenter's list. The carpenter's list, I repeated, and felt my shoulders unclench like a door that's been oiled. He handed me a 1-page sheet titled Repair Behaviors You Can Measure. It was nothing fancy, just verbs with boxes. Attend session, send receipts, no contact verification, phone transparency, location check-in, act of service requested by partner. It looked like a grocery list for dignity. "I can work with lists," I said. "I cannot work with speeches." "Good," he said, and gave me the kind of smile a teacher gives a student who brought a pencil and a spine. Back home, I taped the sheet inside a cabinet door, where only I would see it. I poured a glass of water and drank it slow. Then I opened the back door and let the evening in. The basil had gone a little wild. I pinched the tops and tucked them into a jar. The neighbor's dog barked twice, and then thought better of it. Inside, the washer clicked done and the dryer thumped like a drum, keeping 2 people honest. After dinner, we sat at the table with 2 pens, 1 calendar, and 1 truth between us. 3 months, I said. Guest room, phones transparent, location sharing on, doctor's appointments scheduled, STI panel and regular checkups, no alcohol in the house, chores on the list. Weekly check-in using this script, I slid the paper across. He read it like a contract. "I agree." "And if you fail?" I asked. "I acknowledge that you may end this marriage," he said, quiet and square. No bargaining, no persuasion theater. I let the silence hold us accountable. Then I wrote our names under the list and the date, as if a kitchen table can be a notary when 2 adults are tired of their own damage. He carried his copy to the guest room like a man carrying a manual. I rinsed the glasses and turned off the lights. In the hallway, I paused and pressed my palm to the guest room door, not to bless it, not to pity it, but to acknowledge a new geography, his there, mine here, our hope mapped only in verbs. In my room, I slid the river stone back to the windowsill and set my grandmother's bowl in the exact middle of the shelf. It had earned its center again. I crawled into bed and listened to the house settle around me, wood remembering it was a tree once, wind remembering it was breath. When sleep found me, it did not ask for credentials. It just lay down where I was and kept me. Sunday woke up like a person who didn't want to be late again. At 6:13, the coffee maker burbled, and at 6:15, the kitchen smelled like the kind of morning you can believe in. The porch light was off, he'd remembered the new rule, and the little square he'd drawn beside porch light on Friday now wore a blue check mark. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. We moved around each other like two people practicing traffic laws. Signals, right-of-way, full stops. I sliced fruit. He set a plate and a glass of water, then stepped back like a waiter keeping boundaries. 6:15 works? He asked. It does, I said, and meant the coffee and the time and the fact that he was asking instead of announcing. After breakfast, he pulled a ladder from the garage and checked gutters that hadn't wronged anybody. I put fresh sheets in the guest room anyway. Respect isn't a favor, it's a standard. By 10 o'clock, we'd both showered and chosen the rest of our day with intention. He had a counseling intake packet to complete, I had bills to move from the joint account to mine, and one basil plant that had the nerve to thrive. At 11:02, my email chimed. Subject line, lease termination acknowledgement. I opened it and read the paragraph twice, slow like scripture. Keys surrendered, access revoked, prorated refund to be issued to the originating account once preserved funds are cleared under the notice. There was a PDF stamped by the complex office, the kind of stamp that says a thing is more than talk. I forwarded it to Audra with a simple received, thank you, and took a screenshot from my folder titled Proof, Exterior. There's a piece particular to paperwork. It clocks in, it doesn't drink, it brings witnesses. At 12:19, the bank called. We have the court order and your instructions. The woman said, voice brisk but kind. Joint card recurring charges are paused, pending written authorizations from both account holders. We'll send you an itemized list to reassign or cancel. Thank you, I said. I'll move utilities and the streaming services to my account. He can shoulder his gas and Jim. The rest will evaluate. Understood, she answered. I'll flag any attempted charges on the travel card as declines with notice to both of you. When she hung up, I scribbled a note on the kitchen pad. Auto pays. Migrate by Wednesday, and drew my own little box. There's something satisfying about a box waiting to be checked that doesn't belong to anyone's promises but mine. We ate lunch quietly. He cleared the dishes without auditioning for a medal. Later, he appeared in the doorway with a manila folder held by the top so I wouldn't have to touch what I didn't invite. Doctor's appointments, he said. Primary on Tuesday, panel ordered. I can have the results released directly to you. Do that, I said. He nodded and left the folder on the console table where the mail sits until a grown-up decision. By late afternoon, my phone chimed with a neighborhood thread. Tanya, as reliable as sunrise, had posted a photo of her back stoop, a little brass plaque she'd screwed to the siding that read Love Knocks. The comments bloomed. Renee asked where to buy it. Someone else said her grandbaby had started saying, "May I enter like a tiny gentleman?" I smiled and answered with a picture of my door. No plaque, just an index card taped at kid-eye level. We knock, we wait, we ask. Sometimes a marker can carry a whole house's grammar. Monday tried to run me over the way Mondays do. A delivery was short. A supplier wanted to renegotiate. A regular asked for a loaf I'd retired because my back is no longer 30. The bell on the bakery door did that hopeful ding 57 times before lunch, and I tied my apron twice when the strings came loose. All the while, my pocket held a phone that didn't feel like a grenade anymore. At 1:42, Terrence texted the check-in script we'd agreed on. No poetics, just the facts. 1:42 p.m., leaving office for Dr. H. Arrive 1:55, phone stays on, location sharing verified. We'll send session proof and next appointment time afterward. Evening plan, groceries, list attached. Gutters, finish. Ethics training module, 60 minutes. 9:30, lights out. No contact remains in place and observed. I rate it twice. The part that mattered was not his sentences, it was the absence of performance. I typed back, received, share only receipts, proofs. Groceries? Add lemons, not limes. Copy, he wrote, and a picture pinged of his location dot inside the therapist's building. It looked like the most boring blue I'd ever seen. I saved it anyway. That evening after supper, he opened the laptop at the dining table, the one we both use for taxes and recipe clippings, and completed the company's ethics module while I watered the plants. The narrator on his video spoke in a voice as soothing as oatmeal about fiduciary duty. I didn't linger to supervise. Supervision is not a marriage. I wiped down the counter, humming the chorus of an old hymn my grandmother used to muffle while she ironed, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah." My hands remembered her movements. My heart remembered mine. Tuesday brought a different kind of quiet. The building manager called to confirm they'd changed the access codes on the units with returned keys. "Just want you to know we locked it down," she said. "We'll mail the refund check to your attorney per the order." "Thank you for following paper," I said. "We've learned from this week," she admitted. "We posted a consent policy in the lobby. Not cameras, that's a different mess, but just clear words about entry. Folks have been taking pictures of it like it's art. Sometimes a rule is beautiful," I said, and she laughed. At 3:07, Terrence sent the lab portal share notice. 2 hours later, the results populated. Negative where they should be. I read them without telling my pulse to slow. It did anyway. I took a screenshot and placed it in a folder marked Proof. Interior. I don't know why naming it that made me tear up, but you can cry over a label if it stands for a life. After dinner, he stood at the threshold to the kitchen. "I've drafted an impact letter," he said, "not to read you into feelings. To show I understand what actions did, Dr. H asked me to write and hold it for when, not if, you want to see it. I won't hand it to you unless you ask." "Good," I said. "I'm not taking anything hot off the stove." He nodded and tucked the letter back into a folder with counseling worksheets that had the calm handwriting of a man trying to repair a fence in winter. Wednesday, Audra sent a clean copy of our financial boundaries addendum. It was 3 pages and a single heartbeat. No new debt, no new leases, no gifts above $50, no cash withdrawals over $100, no accounts we can't both see. At the bottom, the signatures sat like 2 adults who knew they weren't children. I printed a copy for the kitchen cabinet and one for the fire safe where the passports live. At noon, my sister called. My body braced, then remembered she never asks for details like gossip. "How's your spirit?" she said. "Like a quilt with new stitches," I answered. "Which square are you working on today?" "Utilities," I said, and we both laughed the kind of laugh that isn't about humor. It's about surviving. "You need me to come sit?" she asked. "Not today." "Maybe Saturday morning you can come on a walk and scold me for not wearing a hat." "On my calendar," she said. "We said, 'I love you,' and eat something green, and hung up without a single sentence that made me smaller. The afternoon brought a temptation to make the day a story instead of a day. A coworker of his, one of those men who thinks a woman is the help even when she's the owner, stopped by for 3 lemon bars and an update. "It true what they're saying?" he asked. "Like gossip is just weather in a different suit." "It's true we're closed on Sundays and the lemon bars sell out by 3, I said, and handed him his change with a smile that made its point without calling the manager. He left, disappointed. I checked the oven and breathed. My knees whispered that I am no longer 25. I promised them a soak later. The dough rose like a forgiveness you can see. In the evening, Terrence knocked lightly on the doorframe and held up his phone before he entered the kitchen. "Proof of reimbursement," he said. A screenshot showed the company card balance at 0 with his personal transfer highlighted. Below it, a calendar event for his ethics training, complete with a reminder set to repeat monthly for a year. He didn't explain it. He didn't linger. He set the phone on the counter, stepped back and asked, "Any house tasks you want first tomorrow? Before work?" The windows in the front room, I said. They catch dust, like gossip. Windows first, he said, and wrote it on his list with the same steady script he used for coordinates and confessions. Before bed, I stood at the hallway table with our check-in sheet. Under acts of service requested, I wrote, change the air filter. Bring in the basil if the night drops under 50. Ask me once a day if I need a sit or a laugh. I didn't leave a box next to the last one. Some things don't need to be checked off. They need to be lived in. I slept with the window cracked to let the cool in. Sometime near midnight, rain stitched the roof in a small, steady pattern, like a grandmother hemming the edge of a day. In the guest room, a floorboard creaked just once. Our house learned our new weight together. Thursday morning, I found a note on the cutting board, folded once. Request, may I schedule a joint session with Dr. H for late next month? We can cancel if your feet say no. Beneath, a sticky note from my own hand days ago. Feet first, heart later. I smiled at the conversation between the past and the present and wrote, you may request again in 2 weeks. Then I drew a box and left it empty as a future I might choose. At lunch, the city bulletin arrived in my inbox. Housing's monthly update. Item 3, tenant education night, consent and access, plain language policies that protect. The picture was of a community room with a banner that said, knock, ask inform. I remembered the inspector's steady hands, Reina's careful seals, Hernandez's frown. That meant he was on your side. I sent the link to Jamal upstairs with a lemon roll emoji. He replied with a selfie of him tapping the flyer in the lobby and a caption, we out here learning verbs, Ms. Leela. That evening, after the chores and the check-in, after the basil was tucked inside like a sleepy child and the porch light was set out like hospitality, I sat at the table alone with a bowl of strawberries and a glass of water cold enough to make my teeth sing. I opened the envelope with the quartz blue stamp and touched the edge like you touch a scar that doesn't hurt anymore. Then I slid it back beneath the paperweight and left it there without reverence or resentment. Some repairs look like windows washed, receipts saved, coffee set for 6:15. Some look like a man sleeping down the hall and not trying to be poetry. Mine were all small and they were working. When I turned out the kitchen light, I paused and looked at the index card on the door, the one in my own handwriting. We knock, we wait, we ask. I tapped each period like a metronome. Then I went to bed and slept the sleep you earn with verbs. The first consequence didn't arrive like thunder. It came the way most reckonings do, by email at 8:03 on a weekday with a subject line that sounded like oatmeal. Compliance follow-up, expense irregularities. Terrence forwarded it before I asked, a small act that would have looked like manners once and now looked like sobriety. Per your disclosure and remittance, we've closed the ledger variance. Committee assignment paused pending completion of ethics modules and supervisory check-ins. Please confirm you've notified your team lead. He wrote back while I watched from my side of the kitchen island as if the granite were a border. Confirmed. Owning my conduct and next steps with my team today. Thanks for the clear path. No performance. No paragraphs he didn't owe. He hit send and stared at the tiny whoosh like a man watching his breath leave a cold window. HR asked if you'd like a separate call, he said, turning the laptop so I could see a calendar block they'd held. He didn't try to curate it. If you don't, they'll route everything through me and Audra. I considered. I don't need their sympathy, I said. I need their boundaries. He nodded like a student who'd finally found the right line in the textbook. You have them. By noon, Word had done what Word does, not gossipy. Our circles aren't that small, but practical. Tanya texted a heart and a grocery meme without a single question. My sister sent a sunflower gif and hat on Saturday, don't argue. The church women's thread, normally a potluck of casseroles and scripture, posted the flyer for a consent and care workshop and 5 hands raised emoji. No one asked for details. I liked our people for that. At 2, Terrence sent a screenshot of his team chat. It wasn't confessional. It was stewardship. I mishandled a company resource. I've reimbursed it, owned it to HR, and stepped back from decisions requiring higher trust while I rebuild it. Please route anything sensitive through Sam in the interim. I'm available for the work I'm assigned and the work of repair. A beat later, a message from Sam. Appreciate the clarity. Let's get the deliverable done and the rest done right. A few thumbs, one, here if you need, from a kid who joined last year. Consequences don't need applause, they need calendars. That evening he knocked, 1, 2, on the doorframe and held up his phone. No contact log, he said. Carrier reports in the portal if you want to see numbers, and Dr. H added a line about third-party verification to my treatment plan. A month ago, that stew of words would have tasted like surveillance. Now it tasted like a bowl you put on the table before grace because everyone needs to see what's being served. I glanced at the spreadsheet, dates, times, zeros where zeros should be, and nodded. Leave it by the fruit bowl, I said. We'll put it with the others on Friday. We ate on the porch, plates balanced on our knees, the light falling cleanly across the porch boards he'd already swept. Between bites, he asked, would you like me to replace the sagging screen this weekend or hire it out? I'd like to do it, but I won't volunteer myself where my hands aren't a comfort. Replace it, I said. Screens are forgiveness adjacent. He smiled with the kind of small relief you don't trust, and you accept anyway. The weekend crept up like a cat and sat on the sill. Saturday morning, my sister showed up with a visor and that bossy love we share. We walked the long block under the hackberries while she talked about her knees, and I talked about basil. I told her about boxes checked, about windows washed, about the way a 6:15 coffee can patch a whole hour. I did not say the other woman's name. I will not hold strangers in my mouth unless they're guests. Do you think you'll let him back in your room? She asked. Not like a pry, more like a weather forecast. I think I like the sound of one person breathing, I said. I think doors teach. She said. Leave them to their teaching. Back home, Terrence had taken the screen off its track and laid it on sawhorses. The old mesh sagged like a tired net. He measured twice, cut once, and stretched the new wire taut, fingers slow and sure. It was the least poetic thing I'd seen all week, and it nourished me. At noon, the serious mail arrived. Thick envelopes with windows, the kind that used to make my stomach bite itself. I set them in a neat stack and opened them in order. Bank confirmations, the building's stamped lease closure, the therapist's letterhead with an appointment grid, the court's receipt for the preservation notices. Each one a stitch. Each one a small square that, together, might be a blanket. I filed them in proof, exterior and proof interior because names matter. Afterwards, I made a sandwich and ate it, standing up like a busy person who also wasn't hiding. Sunday brought church. I wore the navy dress that doesn't try too hard, and a scarf the color of peaches. Terrence said he'd join me if I wanted, or sit home if I didn't. Come, I said, and sit on the aisle like a man who can leave if I frown. We walked in side by side and not touching. Sister Louise grabbed my hands and squeezed 3 times, the old code for I love you. She did not glance at him. The sermon wandered through Luke, and then, like rivers do, found its sea. Tell the truth and do the truth are kinfolk. People nodded the way folks nod when they've got someone on their mind. On the last hymn, Terrence's voice stayed under the notes so mine could have the melody. That felt like a sentence he'd rewritten. After the benediction, Pastor met us at the door with his diplomat smile. You all need anything that fits in my lane? He asked. Paper, I said, half joking and not. We're keeping plenty. Good, he said. Paper is just truth wearing its Sunday clothes. Monday evening, Jamal from upstairs knocked and handed me a package. Left at our door by mistake, he said, then lowered his voice. Also, Ms. Lila, My cousin's in IT. He says if y'all want to automate a monthly dump of the carrier log so you don't have to think about it, he can set it up. No cost. He likes to sleep, knowing people keep their receipts. Tell your cousin we said thank you, I answered. We're building a life that likes bedtime again. No copy that, he said, and slid back down the hall, soft as a cat. On Tuesday, my hand hovered over the envelope that held Terrence's impact letter like a palm over a hot dish. I wasn't ready to read it, but I was ready to decide when I would be ready. I texted Dr. H, who'd offered to hold it in the office safe if I didn't want it in my house. Hold for 30 days, I wrote. If I ask sooner, I'll ask. If I don't, shred on day 31. She replied with a thumbs up and a single line I respected, instruction saved. Timer set. There's a flavor of care that tastes like neutral yogurt, clean, nourishing, unsweet. I'm learning to like it. Midweek, life did the thing it does. Put a small mercy right where your eyes land. The City Housing Bulletin posted a photo from the consent and access night, and there in the back row sat the building manager from the apartment, one hand up, a notebook open. The caption read, "Vendors, landlords, and tenants learning together." I didn't need their forgiveness. I needed them to change the way they locked a door. The picture looked like a hinge moving. Thursday, the therapist called with a logistical question, and a question that wasn't. Terrence reports following the plan and engaging, she said. Remember, you get to set the pace of the system we're building. Are you interested in a joint session on shared language for repair in 6 weeks? The curriculum's plain spoken. No cliff diving, plain spoken. No cliff diving. Ask me again in 2, I said. She laughed gently like a neighbor who knows which mailbox is yours. I'll put a tickler. Over dinner that night, fish, rice, broccoli we didn't burn, Terrence said, HR asked me to speak at the internal lunch and learn next quarter about expense integrity. If you're not comfortable, I'll decline. What would you say? I asked. Not my story, he said, but the part that belongs to work. How fast a man can start believing the rules are for other people. How the receipts don't lie. How reimbursing is the beginning of honesty, not the end. Say that, I answered. Stand there and don't make yourself the hero of the thing you broke. I won't, he said, and a quiet settled that looked like a table set for 4, but only 2 chairs pulled out. Room for future, not pressure to fill it. Friday, I moved the last autopay and drew a box around UTILITIESMIGRATED and pressed my pen into it until the ink made a small starburst. I took a picture and sent it to my sister with the caption, "Behold, the boring glory." She replied with a sticker of a woman doing a shoulder shimmy. When Terrence came home, he put his phone face down on the console and washed his hands like a man who planned to make a salad and not a scene. We didn't debrief the week. We lived it. He fell asleep at 9:42 with the guest room lamp clicked off. I read 3 chapters of a novel where nobody cheats and the pie's always said. Around 10, a text pinged from an unknown number. Short, blunt, and not a performance. You don't know me. You don't have to answer. I ended something I shouldn't have started. I will not contact him or you again. I signed receipt of the no contact through counsel. I'm sorry. The name was only initials. I stared 1 heartbeat too long, then forwarded the message to Audra with received. Please file and deleted it from my phone. Not to erase it, only to put it where paper lives and feelings don't get to play with matches. Saturday came with peaches at the farmer's market and a sun that was kinder than last week's. We bought 4, not 6. I am practicing enough. Back home, he pulled weeds from the strip beside the driveway. I pruned the basil and pinched off a flower like a future I want later. When the afternoon cooled, I walked to the mailbox and stood in the shade, reading a note from housing about a new tenant handbook template. I traced the words, plain language, and smiled. Things grow. It is their nature. That night, for the first time, I cracked our bedroom door and let the hallway's cooler air slide in. I did not invite him. I did not narrate it. The basil plant on the sill breathed that peppery green that says summer's not done yet. I slept with my palm open on the sheet, fingers not curled around anything. Morning would come, because it always does, with 6:15 coffee and a porch light that turns off on time and a list that asks for boxes and offers none for miracles. And if you're wondering whether love lives here, the answer is unremarkable and sufficient. Love learns the house verbs. It knocks, it asks, it waits. It puts its phone on the console and its hands in the sink. It brings receipts, not poetry. It apologizes in drafts, not speeches. It understands that some doors are teachers. 2 weeks is a funny measure, long enough for basil to bolt if you don't pinch it, short enough that a habit can still feel like a costume. That's what we were. 2 people trying on behaviors and asking the mirror, does this look like us yet? I kept my mornings, my 6:15 coffee, my porch. I added 1 new minute to the ritual. After the mug warmed my palms, I opened the proof interior folder and skimmed the week's log. No contact attestations, therapy check-ins, the plain little boxes that made it possible to sit still. I didn't interrogate them. I confirmed their existence the way you pat your pocket for keys. Terrence learned the art of asking for small permissions, not guilt-laden, not manipulative, not the if you say no, I'll sulk kind. I can spot across a parking lot. Simple asks with clear edges. Would you like tea? I'm making some. Yes, mint. May I use the printer? HR needs a signed form. I'll scan it and put it back, yes. Leave it in the tray when you're done. On the 4th Thursday, he stood by the guest room door with a laundry basket balanced against his hip. May I wash the sheets in here, or would you prefer I not enter? You may, I said. Say entering, before you go in. He did, like a surgeon announcing the first incision. Entering, he said to an empty room, and something in my chest loosened because he was finally speaking the language of the house. The real test arrived like they do, unplanned and early. My niece's engagement dinner. I'd RSVP'd yes with a note. I may step out early. The day of the party, my sister texted me a table chart and a photo of centerpieces, and then a separate message. He's invited if you invite him. It's your night either way. At 5:30, I zipped the navy dress, the one that makes me hold my shoulders a half-inch higher. Terrence, in the doorway, asked, Would you like me to drive you and leave after I drop you? Or shall I stay home? Drive me, I said, and expect to leave alone. He nodded, didn't flinch, didn't offer a sales pitch. On the road, he kept the radio low and the turns gentle. At a long light, he said, I know how a man looks when he walks into a room certain of his place. I will not do that. I watched his hands on the wheel. They were quiet hands. The restaurant was all candles and after-work laughter. We arrived 5 minutes early so I could choose how to enter. At the door, he opened it and stepped aside like a doorman. Inside, I found my sister and pressed both cheeks to hers. Something we reserve for weddings and funerals and the thin spaces between. I caught a whiff of her perfume, citrus and laundry, and my eyes prickled. You look expensive, she whispered. Keep the receipt. Terrence approached my sister and kept his hands visible. Thank you for hosting, he said. I'm here to drop Lila and wish your girl congratulations. My sister stared 2 beats, then surprised us both. You may sit for a glass of water, she said, and then we'll all practice leaving well. He took the end seat, the way a man takes the edge of a pew to slip out before the recessional. He toasted with water when everyone else reached for wine. He said congratulations to my niece, and nothing else that could register on a ledger. When it was time, he stood, nodded at the room, and left. No performance, no pockets turned out to show there were no rabbits. My niece leaned into me after dessert. "Auntie," she said, you good?" She has my mother's eyes and my father's bluntness. I squeezed her hand. "I'm at a table with my people eating the kind of cake that remembers butter," I said. "I'm good enough." Back home, the porch light glowed like it knew its duty. Terrence was already parked at the curb, seat tipped back, radio off. He'd waited. "How'd it go?" he asked, starting the car. "Like a meal," I said. "Courtesies, laughter, and a check at the end." He nodded, drove slow, didn't put his hand on my knee. I noticed the absence and the presence both. The next morning brought rain, the steady kind that doesn't apologize for staying. I made pancakes because rain begs for hot circles, and halfway through flipping the second batch, the doorbell chimed. Audra, HR, on my porch under a red umbrella. Not unannounced, she'd texted an hour earlier asking to drop off a signed copy for my records. Terrence was at his desk. I opened the door with a dish towel thrown over my shoulder and the smell of butter telling the truth. She smiled in that HR way that has to be both friendly and documented. "These are for you," she said, handing me an envelope. "No need to discuss details. I just like people to have their own paper." "Thank you," I said. "Do you eat pancakes?" Her laugh was a small bell. "I do," she said, stepping inside and wiping her shoes, and I promised not to log it. We ate at the counter. She didn't ask for the story, she asked for the verbs. "What's working?" she said. "What's hard?" "Working," I said, ticking invisible boxes, "is small asks, clear answers, paper before feelings. Hard is remembering that patience isn't passivity. Hard is not grading every good thing for extra credit." She nodded, wrote nothing, and somehow left me with a page of answers I didn't have to say out loud. On her way out, she looked at the guest room door and then at my face. "You seem like a person who knows how to keep a room." "Keep this one," she said. I let those words sit on the table like a folded napkin. That afternoon, I took the long route to the market in a raincoat that finally earned its keep. An older couple in matching ponchos shuffled past, arguing softly about tomatoes. The woman turned to me and said, "We've been married 53 years. He still picks the wrong ones." The man, not missing a beat, said, "That's because you like them wrong." We all laughed, and I tucked the scene into my pocket. There are people who make it through because they decided to keep deciding. I'm practicing that. In therapy, I carried my silence like an instrument and played only the notes I intended. "Doctor," H asked, "do you want reconciliation or do you want repair?" I said, "I want repair so that reconciliation is an option I can accept or decline without anyone starving." She scribbled a star in her notebook and said, "Good." That's a plate, not a leash. We worked on sentences, not flowery, not punitive. Sentences that could live on a refrigerator magnet without making me roll my eyes. My safety is not a debate topic. Progress is measured in boring ways. No one performs at bedtime. We don't talk about her. We talk about groceries, therapy, budget, and the garden. Terrence's homework came with bullets and dates and the offender's usual suspects. Shame that disguises itself as helpfulness, impatience dressed up like passion, storytelling that wants to turn him into the protagonist of the harm. He started catching himself mid-sentence, like a hand swerving before touching a hot pan. "That's me trying to audition," he'd say. "I'll step off the stage." On the third Sunday, Pastor asked for volunteers to repaint the fellowship hall. Terrence looked at me like a man checking the crossing guard before stepping off the curb. I nodded. "Paint is a house verb," I said. He showed up, wore the t-shirt they handed him with a name tag that said, "Hello, I'm here to work," and took the roller section nobody wants, the high corners where cobwebs pretend to be trim. He came home speckled and quiet and satisfied in the way a person is when the day's math adds up. The only real wobble came on a Tuesday when my phone chirped at 7:11 p.m. restricted number. I let it ring. 30 seconds later, a voicemail transcribed itself across my screen. Not a full sentence, just a breath and a scrape and a whispered "I'm" before silence. I forwarded it to Counsel and Audra with "unknown" for record. Then I put my phone in the bread drawer and mixed biscuit dough by hand, because kneading is a kind of prayer. Terrence didn't ask me who called. He took the trash out without making the lid announce his righteousness. Later, he set a cup of chamomile by my elbow and said, "I added a log entry. You received a restricted voicemail. You forwarded. I had no contact." It was the right amount of words. A month to the day after I moved the last autopay, I mailed myself a letter. I wrote it at the kitchen table with the window open to the sound of someone mowing 3 yards over. Dear Lila of 1 month from now, pick 3 ordinary things you have because you did the boring work. Drink something hot while you list them. If future you didn't need this letter, recycle it. If you did, remember you are the person who builds rooms. Keep the verbs. Keep the receipts. Keep your peace. You. When it arrived, I left it unopened on the mantel for a week as if it were a gift I wasn't ready to unwrap. Then, on a Saturday when the sky decided to be absolutely indecently blue, I slid it open and read it out loud to the basil. I chose my 3. The screen door sliding smooth on new rollers, a bank statement without asterisks, and the sound of one person breathing in a room that teaches. That evening, Terrence stood, as he always does now, at the line where the kitchen tile meets the hall hardwood. "May I sit on the porch with you?" he asked. "I'll bring a second chair." "Yes," I said. He carried the chair like a man who knows a seat can be revoked. We didn't talk much. Fireflies did their small gala across the lawn. A neighbor walked a dog that had newly discovered its leash. Somewhere, somebody grilled chicken. It was a scene no story would bother to write, and it was perfect. After a while, he said, "I know you don't need a speech, but there's one sentence I need to rehearse because I want to say it right when it needs saying. Say it. I will not ask you to shorten the distance it takes for you to feel safe," he said. He didn't look at me when he said it. He watched the fireflies like a student who finally understands the lab. "Good," I said. "Learn it by heart." We sat until the porch light clicked itself on at the hour I'd set in the app. It's such a little thing, lights obeying you. But this house has taught me that little things, done consistently, can carry the weight of big truths. He carried his chair back inside. I left mine out to cool. When I finally stood, I did not close the bedroom door. I did not open it wide. I left it the way you leave a book you're willing to finish tomorrow, face down, page marked with a grocery receipt. I turned off the kitchen light, set my phone screen down on the console, and let the house say the last words. It said, with its quiet, "We are learning the verbs." The next stress test didn't arrive as a storm. It came folded into a white envelope with a window. Refund statement. The building that had hosted his double life owed a prorated balance for the last month after the lease termination. I stood at the counter with my letter opener, watching the way light fell on stainless steel, taking note of how calm can be a learned thing. Inside, a check made out to him alone. A note about, "We're sorry to see you go. Keys received, deposit minus cleaning fee." It wasn't the number. It was the pronoun, him. I slid the paper into a clear sleeve and sent 2 emails, one to counsel, one to the property manager, attaching the separation agreement clause about marital funds and joint restitution. Counsel replied in 10 minutes with language that made my shoulders relax. "Reissued check will be made out to the marital account in trust as stipulated. I'll handle the communication." The property manager replied in 30 with 3 words and a PDF. Understood. Reissuing today. Paper moved the world a millimeter to the right. You could almost hear it click. I left the envelope on the mantel beside the letter I'd mailed to myself. When Terrence got home, he didn't touch it. He stood at the regulated distance and asked, "Would you like me to read it or simply note that it arrived?" "Note it," I said. "Noted," he said, and wrote himself a line in that little notebook he keeps now, where he practices humility in ink. Small wins don't trend. They don't make a room gasp. They feel like finding the perfect drawer organizer, the kind that turns a junk space into a place where things belong. When he asked if he could move a few shirts back into the primary closet, I said, "One hanger. Nothing with pockets." He nodded like a man getting his first library card and hung a single white shirt. It looked almost holy amid my dresses, like a flag at half-mast. On a Wednesday, I took a personal day without justifying it to anyone, not even the part of my brain hired as my accountant. I texted my sister, "Borrowing your kitchen." She didn't ask why. She knew that borrowing a kitchen is code in our family for needing a place to make a mess while telling only the truth. I spent 3 hours teaching her daughter to laminate dough, fold, turn, rest, repeat, like a sermon with butter. Between turns, my niece asked, "Is love just choosing the same person more times than you don't?" I said, "It's choosing the verbs that keep you safe while you choose the person." She nodded like she'd just learned a spell. Back home, the basil had gone leggy. I pinched the tops and whispered, "You're doing too much," and felt the lesson touch both of us. Terrence came in from therapy holding a crumpled printout. He set it on the table without pushing it toward me. "Homework," he said, "to share only if you ask." I didn't. It was enough to see his pen marks, the places his afterward self had argued with his before self in the margins. That weekend, the church hosted a tools and tea Saturday, half the fellowship hall laid out with drills and sandpaper, the other half with scones. I went for the tea. He went for the tools. We left at the same time and did not carpool. Boundaries can be polite. I watched him from across the room and the nicked-up toy shelves in the nursery. He worked like someone who understood that children reach for corners. When Pastor walked by with a tray of lemon bars, she paused by my elbow. "Some men want applause," she said under her breath. "He looks like he wants instructions." "Both are loud," I said. "One is useful." A week later, my phone delivered a ping that had once meant dread and now meant documentation. Unknown number left a voicemail. I forwarded it, placed the transcript in the proof exterior folder, and went back to trimming wicks. The voice barely formed a word before the line clicked off. There's a mercy in how boring justice can be, but repair is not all paperwork and pancakes. Sometimes it's a rogue memory that knocks a picture off its nail. I opened a drawer looking for a charger and found beneath a stack of lint-rolled scarves a photo from a beach I'd forgotten we'd visited. We were both sunburnt and smug with fried shrimp. He was looking at me with a softness I once mistook for forever. I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself miss the feeling without inviting it back in. Grief and nostalgia are cousins who wear the same perfume. That night, he made black beans with garlic and cumin, the way my grandmother taught me. He asked exactly once if I wanted cilantro. "On the side," I said. He slid a small dish across the counter and stepped back. We ate in parallel at the island, the comfortable silence of people who've learned that not every good thing needs narration. After dishes, he stood at the hallway threshold. "May I read you a sentence I need to say to myself out loud?" he asked. "One," I said. He stared at the grain of the floor, not at me. "I don't get to be proud of myself for stopping harm," he said. "Stopping harm is the floor." I didn't clap. I didn't cry. I nodded slow. "Good," I said. "Keep sweeping." On the first Friday of the month, Audra sent an email titled Quarterly Check-In, Pure HR, Pure Mercy. She asked 3 questions and offered no commentary boxes. 1. Are safeguards in place and functioning? 2. Do you need employer support adjusted? 3. Any timelines you want on paper? I replied. Yes, not currently. 6 months on the guest room. Revisit with counsel present. She wrote back a single emoji, thumbs up, and a note, calendar invites attached. Somewhere in a server farm, my safety had an appointment. Thursday turned into a little ceremony I kept for myself. After work, I stopped at the nursery and bought a plant I had no business rescuing. This week's was a pothos with one dramatic vine and dreams of windows. I repotted it in the terracotta I keep as both hobby and therapy. Terrence watched from the doorway, hands behind his back like he was visiting a museum. "What will you name that one?" he asked. "Policy," I said. "It's unkillable if you water it." He smiled in the way a person does when the joke teaches something. "May I water Policy on Tuesdays?" he asked. "You may water Policy on the Tuesdays I'm away after confirming with me that the soil is dry," I said, and we both laughed because love, when it grows up, learns how to use adverbs. Saturday we hosted, and by hosted I mean put out 2 pitchers and let people bring everything else. My porch has always been a soft landing for stray conversations. My sister came with 3 kinds of olives because she never met a brine she didn't trust. The new teacher from down the street brought a salad dented with good feta. Jamal from the first-floor condo, the one who first told me about rooter logs months ago, showed up with ribs that made the air beg. Terrence worked the grill without working the crowd. He asked the same question of everyone. "How do you like your edges?" About meat, yes, but also not. At dusk, when plates were mostly bones and lemon rinds, my neighbor's little girl appeared with a library book about volcanoes and the certainty that I would care. We sat on the steps and read about pressure and steam and the ways the earth makes room for new rock. "It explodes and makes more mountain," she said, solemn as if she'd discovered a law. "Sometimes," I said, "sometimes it just lets off a little smoke and nobody gets burned." When the last Tupperware buckled closed and the porch had that satisfied afterglow of something done right, Terrence carried a trash bag to the curb. He came back with his palms up, empty, not pleading. "May I have 5 minutes?" he asked. "To say what I am learning, not to sell what I deserve?" "You may," I said, setting the timer on the stove like a parent who finally trusts a curfew. He sat at the table edge, feet planted. "I am learning to love what paper does for feelings," he said. "It doesn't replace them. It holds them in a way they survive. I am learning that my shame wants to run the meeting, and that when shame chairs the meeting, the minutes are lies. I am learning I can be good at chores and still not be safe to love unless the inside work is visible and slow and witnessed." He stopped there and looked at the timer like a man who meant to keep his promise. When it chimed, I clicked it off. "That was 4 minutes," I said. He smiled. "I'm learning to leave early." We took our 2 chairs to the yard and watched the moon invent silver on the neighbor's trampoline. Someone down the block tried and failed to start an old motorcycle. A cat conducted night business along the fence top. In another life, this would be where the narrator tells you they kissed, where orchestras swell and doors swing open. In this life, I put my hand palm down on the arm of my chair. He noticed and did not take it. He mirrored, laying his hand palm down on his own armrest so that our fingers were a foot apart, like 2 sentences that meant the same thing in different languages. The house exhaled. The basil behaved. Policy leaned toward the window, as if listening. "We are not restored. We are being restored, the way a porch is, one soft board at a time, with the understanding that summer will always come back with its little stomping feet. I am not in love with a story of ourselves. I am in relationship with a calendar, a budget, a plant, a community, a man who is learning not to audition, and a woman who finally trusts her verbs." I turned off the porch light. The dark did not scare me. The next Monday smelled like pencil shavings and coffee gone polite. I woke before the alarm, not with dread, but with a to-do list. Call the insurance, label the files, Ask the basil for forgiveness. I pulled on soft jeans and the navy sweater that behaves in every light and found a quiet satisfaction in tying my shoelaces slowly. There's a holiness in not rushing. At work, I blocked an hour to draft something our therapist had suggested. A relationship operating guide. Not vows. Vows make people poetic when what you need is plumbing. I opened a clean document and wrote headings as if I were memoing a merger. Scope. We are rebuilding a household. The product is safety, principles, paper over posture, ask over assume, show over say, practices, weekly calendar check, monthly budget reconcile, quarterly therapist review, annual retreat with no agenda except listening while walking. Alerts. If any unknown number appears more than once, counsel is notified. If anyone feels a symptom, panic, suspicion, withdrawal for longer than 48 hours, name it to the other, then to therapist. I sent it to Terrence with the subject line Draft V 1.0, guardrails, then closed my laptop and went to refill my mug. By the time I came back, an edit history had bloomed like time-lapse ivy. He hadn't rewritten, he had annotated. In the margins, can we add a technology clause? I'll put all passcodes in the vault and list every device I own, and under alerts, add, if I am tempted to contact anyone I should not, I tell on myself to you and to therapist immediately. He ended with, thank you for writing the map instead of asking me to guess home. Maps don't move mountains, but they keep you from walking off the same cliff twice. That night, the house got tested. The way houses do, indifferently. The upstairs toilet failed the way old things fail, with a sigh and a trickle that became a river. I heard it first as a different kind of rain, wrong in the bones. I ran to the hall and saw water slicking toward the top stair like it had an appointment with gravity. Main shut off, I said to no one and everyone, and he said, basement, and took the steps in the exact number I would have taken them. Careful, fast, owning the rhythm without show. The handle resisted. He leaned into it. The pipe complained. The house groaned. The water knelt. We stood in socks that had surrendered to the moment and laughed like people at the end of a bad joke. Towels, I said. Shop vac, he said. We did not choreograph. We cooperated. By midnight, the hall was dry enough, the fan was bossing the air, and the plumber had a voicemail that began with, no emergency! Morning is fine. Boundaries are not for when you're calm. They're for when you're wet and tired and still choose the gentle verbs. After we washed our hands, he paused at the bathroom door. Thank you for not making my mistake about heroics, he said. What mistake? I asked, pulling my hair into a loose knot. Thinking that fixing a leak makes me a good husband. He looked at the fan as if it could grate him. Good husbands don't ask to be grated. Good husbands install shut-off labels, I said, tipping my chin toward the panel. He smiled, got a Sharpie, and wrote MAIN in block letters a tired person can read. The next afternoon, I had tea with my mother-in-law, who prefers to be called by her first name, Gloria, because grandmothers are a marketing strategy. She wears red lipstick like a thesis and keeps her porch organized the way some people keep bank accounts. I hadn't told her details. I owed her privacy, and I owed myself peace. But she knew something had happened. Mothers keep their own maps. She poured chamomile like she was baptizing something and said, I won't ask. I'll say one thing. I raised that boy. He's good at charm. Charm is for rooms. Character is for kitchens. If he keeps showing up in the kitchen, you'll know. He's in the kitchen, I said. He's reading labels. She lifted an eyebrow. Get him a label maker. Men love tools that don't look like feelings. Then she softened, her hand smoothing a thread on the tablecloth. And, Lila, get yourself something that doesn't look like work. A class. A bench in a park with a nameplate your name is on. I signed up for a pottery class that night. Tuesday, beginner wheel. The studio smelled like wet earth and patience. The instructor had a voice like a blanket, warm with edges. "Centering is 90%, she said, pushing clay into the middle of spinning. "You can't build a thing that stays if the middle is traveling." I thought of bank statements and therapy calendars and plants named Policy. I thought of the way my heart finally wasn't speeding for sport. When my first bowl collapsed into a floppy hat, I laughed. The instructor smiled. "Most useful thing you made tonight is that laugh." On the third Tuesday, I left class with a lopsided mug that looked like it believed in me. At home, he had set 2 mugs on the counter. Mine from class, and one we'd bought on a vacation that now felt like it happened to cousins of ours. "I made cocoa," he said, "the way you like it." "Too sweet, just right," I said, because grief, when properly invited, takes a smaller chair. We sipped and read silently at opposite ends of the sofa. His book was about trees and how forests talk underground. Mine was a novel where the woman saves herself and then decides if anyone else is worth the trouble. At 10, he closed his book and looked at the floor. "I called my mother," he said. "I told her what I did." She said 2 sentences. "I'm disappointed. I'm relieved you told the truth." He swallowed. It made me want to hide and also to keep telling. "Keep telling," I said. "I will," he said, and put his hand over his chest like he was pinning something there. On a Saturday, the doorbell rang and delivered a package with his name, but addressed to Unit 3C. The return address was the apartment building I had come to know better than my own pantry. He brought it inside, set it on the dining table, and stepped back like it might hiss. "May I open it here with you?" he asked. "You may," I said, and stood on the other side. Ceremonial distance, not cruelty. Inside, a small box of kitchen utensils he must have left in that other drawer. A wooden spoon with a burn mark like a comma. A peeler. A chipped mug from a conference where the coffee was always worse than the conversations. He stared down at the spoon as if memory were making a speech he owed silence. Then he got a Sharpie, wrote discard across the box, and sealed it with tape he didn't tear with his teeth. We carried it to the trash together, not as a ritual, as a task. After, we stood at the curb, listening to the lid thud. A breeze did something kind with my hair. A neighbor passed with her dog, the one named Pickles, who wears his ears like banners. She waved. "Porch night next week?" she called. "Oh, bring your stories." I said, "We'll bring the ice." The Wednesday before porch night, our therapist gave us homework we didn't hate. "Plan a 5-minute ceremony," she said, "in which you recognize progress without pretending completion." She looked at me. "You can be the officiant." She looked at him. "You can be the usher. Your job is to make sure the officiant is comfortable." We laughed, because people teach you what you can't afford to forget if you let them. We kept it simple. At dusk, I lit a single candle and said, "We honor the absence of panic." He poured sparkling water into 2 chipped glasses and said, "We honor the ability to sleep without checking the door twice." I read 2 lines I'd written on an index card and folded into the guide. "We will not audition for each other. We will document and rest." He said, "Amen." Not because we're pious, but because sometimes there's no better period. The next test arrived via sidewalk. I was coming out of the grocery with good strawberries and the kind of bread that makes butter feel like it finally found its job when I saw her across the street. Not a ghost, not a villain. A woman who had been a choice. She wore a jacket too thin for the wind, and she was laughing at something on her phone like relief. My stomach did the small old flip. It will, for a while. I didn't speed up or slow down. I held my bag in both hands like a prayer bowl and crossed to my car. My phone buzzed. Terrence. On my way to therapy, passing the park, reporting, sighted, no contact, keeping appointment, sending this because old me would have made a different choice. I stared at the message until the letters stopped swimming. At home, I washed the strawberries and ate 3 over the sink because certain joys cannot obey place settings. He sent a photo from the waiting room. Knees, carpet, a copy of National Geographic with a whale on it. I replied with a picture of the lopsided mug. We keep what we can hold, Sunday. Pastor preached about blessed are the meek, and then explained meekness like she'd once fought a horse. Meek, she said, is power placed on a halter, not power that ran out. People nodded like they'd been waiting for someone to say that out loud in a room with windows. After service, she handed me a card with no scripture, just 4 words. Peace, with seatbelts on. I pinned it to the corkboard in the kitchen next to the plumber's magnet and the library hours. Under it, I taped our guide, version 1.2 now, with a new clause about renegotiating rituals if they turn into performances. We signed and dated it like a contract you want the future to find. That night, the city hummed the low, warm song of people making pasta. I sat on the porch with my feet on the rail like I was trying out a new angle of rest. Fireflies practiced their punctuation in the yard. Policy leaned toward the night like he trusted it. Terrence brought out 2 bowls, mine heavy with pecorino, his plain because he's learning that not every feast is his. He set them down and asked, "Do you want the story I told in therapy, or would you like the silence we earned?" "Silence first," I said. And we ate without narration, which is one of the more grown kinds of love. After the bowls were clean and the forks clinked, the kind of music only a sink understands, he stood in the doorway. "Tomorrow's the 6-month mark," he said. "Do you want to keep the guest room rule? Or talk to counsel about a trial night? Doors open, clothes on, separate pillows, just as a ceremony of not being afraid of the room?" I looked past him to the hallway. The guest room door stood ajar, like an old chaperone who had softened with time. I thought about my body and its right to be safer than my hope. "Let's keep the rule," I said. "I love a ceremony. I don't love auditions." He nodded. "Thank you for letting me ask without punishing me for wanting." He took a step back, hands visible, like a man who has learned the choreography of respect. "Lights off?" he asked. "Leave the porch," I said. "Let the night see us." We sat until the air told our shoulders to go to bed. When I finally stood, I touched the door frame with my fingertips, the way some folks touch relics, and whispered a small thank you to whoever invented paper, plants, and slow men. Tomorrow will bring something ordinary that feels like a test, an email with the wrong salutation, a late train, basil that bolts. We will name it and not let it rename us. That's all I ever wanted from a story that once tried to crown itself with scandal, to end not with trumpets or trials, but with 2 bowls in a sink and a guide on a board and a piece that doesn't need a witness to believe itself. Porch night arrived like a soft rehearsal for ordinary joy. We dragged the wicker chairs forward until the rail made a friendly limit, set the cheap string lights to a low glow, and put ice in a steel bowl so it would sing when it touched glass. The air had that polite summer wait you forgive because the fireflies pay rent on time. Neighbors drifted in with the choreography of people who've agreed to be easy on one another. Kayla came first with pickles, who treats our steps like a stage. Mr. Patel brought seltzers and stories about birds he swears remember him. Gloria arrived last in a linen shirt the color of forgiveness, carrying lemon cookies she called apologies you can eat. No one asked what happened. That was the covenant. Instead, they asked for a corkscrew and whether the fireflies were better this year. We told them yes because some statistics deserve to be generous. Terrence sat at the far end of the porch where he could play usher, refilling glasses, adjusting a fan, handing out napkins like benedictions. It wasn't penance. It was a useful seat. Every now and then his eyes found mine. Not for permission, not for approval, just to check we were still inside the same page. When the talking thinned into that nice shared quiet, Kayla told a story about a road trip that got longer because her cousin refuses to believe in left turns. We laughed into the dark. Then Mr. Patel said he'd taken up watercolor and discovered a shocking truth. Water refuses to obey. Gloria smirked. "Like men," she said. The porch practiced its brakes. Everyone looked down or up or sideways. She tipped her chin toward Terence, who nodded without flinching. "Like me," he said, and handed her a cookie. Later, after they left with their plates and promises to do it again soon, we sat in chairs that remembered our shapes and listened to the street pretend it was a river. He touched the armrest with his fingertips. "I used to measure nights by adrenaline," he said. "Tonight I could measure by ice melt." "Then we're rich," I said. And he smiled at the floor, which was progress. Inside, the answering machine, the one we barely use but keep for older relatives who distrust rectangles, blinked once. A single message waited like a polite knock. I pressed play and braced, not because fear had returned, but because the body respects old alarms. A woman's voice, not hers, spoke slowly, like every word had a witness. "Hello, Mrs. Greer. My name is Paula. I manage leasing compliance for North Ridge Properties. I wanted to confirm the final closure of Unit 3C. The termination is processed. Keys surrendered. Last invoice satisfied via cashier's check from Mr. T. Greer's personal account. A letter of non-authorization has been added to the file to prevent any attempt to renew. Bank records placed on legal hold expire at 12 months unless extended by court. You should have the courier packet by Monday. If you need anything else, my direct number is in the letter. Take care." I pressed stop and let quiet take the room back. He exhaled through his nose, the way people do when a ghost leaves a chair. "Paper," he said. "Paper," I echoed. Monday came with a courier envelope fat as a sermon. I set it on the table like an altar cloth and made a ceremony of my letter opener. Inside, copies of the termination, the receipt for the keys, the affidavit from the building's security camera showing him walking out with a small box and nothing else. The bank's notice of the frozen debit card, the one the lease had used without my consent, signed by bank counsel and stamped like it meant it. A closure timeline stapled and labeled with more dates than feelings. When I reached the last page, I didn't cry. My shoulders did something I hadn't asked them to do in months. They lowered without instruction. I took pictures of the pages and uploaded them to the folder labeled Holdings_repair_2025, then placed the originals in the fireproof box where we keep passports and spare copies of wills. He stood on the other side of the table, his hands at his sides, not reaching, not retreating. "Do you want me to sign anywhere?" he asked. "You already did," I said, tapping the stamp with his name. "Now we file and we rest." That night, I went to pottery and finally made something that believed it was a bowl. The clay centered without a fight, and my palms remembered the part where you make a wall that stays because the middle isn't traveling. On the drive home, the car smelled like wet earth and confidence. When I walked in, he was at the sink with sleeves rolled and the dish towel over his shoulder like a line cook. "Success?" he asked. "Look," I said, and set the bowl on a tea towel. He leaned forward as if examining an infant who needed only admiration. "It's beautiful," he said. It wasn't. But beauty is a promise you keep, not a grade you give. We ate strawberries from it, 2 at a time, and giggled when the red juice found the bowl's soft dip, the flaw that made it ours. He washed it by hand and put it on the top shelf like it had papers. On Wednesday, my inbox pinged with a message I'd been rehearsing my no for. The subject line, "Request for conversation." The sender was the woman's HR generalist, not the woman. The email was, bless them, short. "Ms. Greer, employee requested we ask whether you would consent to a mediated apology meeting." No expectation, no follow-up if declined. They had copied the mediator's address, but no one else's. Paper behaving. I took a walk before answering, the kind where you count mailboxes like beads. The maples along our block gave shade without asking for thanks, and the smallest dog in the neighborhood, a wiry brown thing with a voice like a trumpet, announced me to the afternoon. At the corner, I stopped for the light, even though no car was coming. Not because of fear, because ritual is how you tell your nervous system you've met a light like this before and survived. Back home, I wrote 3 sentences and read them aloud to hear if they behaved. Thank you for the courtesy of the ask. Declined. I wish her a life built on honest verbs. I hit send and felt the peculiar mercy of brevity. The weekend brought a family breakfast with Gloria, who arrives like a small parade even when it's just toast. She watched us move around the kitchen with the observational appetite of a novelist. "You two are quieter," she said, "but not scared quiet." "Garden quiet. Garden quiet," I repeated, liking how it sat in the mouth. She tapped the corkboard with a pink nail. "Is that your rule sheet?" she asked, peering at the guide. "It is," I said. She read the headings, nodding. "I approve of principles. They make a home feel like it has a spine." She got to the final line, "We will not audition for each other." She smiled like a woman who's been to every audition and left when the role was wrong. "Put that one on a pillow," she said. After she left, we moved through Saturday with the ease of people who have traded spectacle for chores. Laundry, farmer's market, vacuum lines like small order in the carpet. He fixed the cabinet hinge that had been telling us a story we wouldn't listen to. I oiled the cutting board and decided to learn the names of 3 new herbs this month so the basil wouldn't feel like an only child. In the afternoon, he knocked before entering my office. Small, polite, 2 beats. "Permission to report?" he asked. "Granted," I said, turning my chair. He stayed in the doorway. Therapist asked me to write a disclosure timeline from my side. Complete, dated, specific. Not to give you, unless you want it. To own. To read aloud in the room. To practice not flinching when facts say their names he swallowed. I finished it. It has holes where I still don't know why I became a man who could lie to someone I love. The holes are the part I will study. "Good," I said. "Bring your holes. We'll plant something in them." He laughed, grateful, and left the doorway like a man exiting a confessional he built himself. Toward dusk, a summer storm shouldered the sky, and the first hard drops hit the porch like a test. He stepped outside to yank in the cushions. I followed because some chores are happier in duet. Thunder told us a story about distance, lightning argued for punctuation. We stood under the awning and watched the street find its shine. He took a breath. "I know we kept the guest room rule," he said softly. "I know I'm the one who made that necessary. I want you to hear me say I'm not counting days like a prisoner, waiting for parole. I'm measuring trust like rain in a drought. I will be grateful for every quarter-inch. Words are easy to draft, harder to inhabit, but gratitude is a muscle if you ask it daily to carry groceries." I set my hand on the rail. "We'll check the gauge together," I said. The storm moved on with the dignified gait of old weather. We went inside and turned on one lamp, the one that flatters everything it touches. He poured water. I opened the window so the late air could borrow our room. We didn't invent a ceremony. We didn't narrate our restraint. We let the evening be a bowl we didn't overfill. When we went to bed, he to the guest room, me to mine, I stood a second in the hallway and listened to both rooms breathe. not to catch him, to bless the distance that had stopped being punishment and started being a tool. Then I turned out the light and lay down on a bed that didn't remember panic anymore. The fan studied the ceiling with me. Policy leafed toward sleep. Somewhere outside, Pickles barked at a branch. Somewhere inside, the map in my chest folded itself neat and waited by the door for morning. I keep a small jar on the kitchen shelf for odd buttons and the kind of screws that look important until you forget where they came from. These days I call it my almost. Proof that so much in a life can wobble and still be tightened again, if you keep the pieces. Morning light came in clean and unhurried. Daniel was already at the bakery, texting me photos of the first trays, glossy flans lined up like patient moons. I sent back a heart and the prayer hands emoji he teases me for. Then I wiped the counter, watered the fern, and sat at the table with my notebook. Not the red ledger. That one lives in the office with the contracts and schedules. This one is softer, the pages a little feathery at the edge. On the first clean line, I wrote 3 words, paper over performance. I underlined them twice, then added a smaller line beneath. We choose repair, not spectacle. The town had found other subjects, as towns mercifully do. The video lost its breath and slid down the feed. Julian moved to a small apartment on Pine, a block with modest trees and a laundromat that smells like warm cotton. He sent 1 email a week. Progress notes, proof of therapy attendance, the accountant's monthly statement, a quiet sentence about a boundary kept. No apologies disguised as poetry, no pleas, just facts that keep their hands to themselves. He signs them simply, "For the record, Julian." Allison left the county. Her lawyers sent a short letter acknowledging service. Daniel filed what needed filing with a face that stayed steady even when his hand shook at the clerk's counter. Some nights he sat on my porch with a mug of tea and watched the street make its small offerings, kids on scooters, a couple arguing gently about cilantro, Pickles posing like a mayor. He'd say, "I thought my life ended in that bedroom." And I'd say, "It changed its name." After a while, he began to say the second part first. I went back to church. I sat in the 5th pew because it squeaks, and I like how it tells the truth aloud. The choir director asked if I'd return to the kitchen for funerals and new babies, the 2 events that make a congregation honest. "You were missed," she said, and I swear the word rang through the rafters like a bell. The first Saturday, I cracked 60 eggs, folded sugar into cream, and carried pans into the fellowship hall, where grief and joy drink coffee from the same white cups. A woman I didn't know hugged me and whispered, "You helped me leave." I didn't ask from what. We owe each other privacy as much as we owe each other courage. When the bakery closed at night, I took to walking the block twice. Slow. The air held whatever the day had baked into it, vanilla, cinnamon, the faint iron of clean sheet pans cooling. There's a corner lamp that throws polite gold on the sidewalk, and if you stand just under it, the moths look like ideas. Busy, unembarrassed, headed toward warmth.